Okay, sorry, we're a little bit late just because of some technical difficulties. So today, we're first going to hear from our Attorney General, then we'll have a presentation from Director of Labor, followed by Department of Transportation, Airports Division, and lastly would be Department of Health. So good morning to our Attorney General.
Hi, good morning. Sorry about those technical difficulties here. I think we're all good to go.
Yeah, we see you.
How do I increase my volume? Oh, here we go. I'm just going to try and hit buttons here so I can increase the volume. Okay, I think we're ready. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I have the option of
we can hear you.
using this.
No, we can
You can hear me fine.
Yeah.
All right, great. Why don't we just stay with that then?
You want to go ahead and start with any updates, or you want us to just go ahead?
Sure. No, absolutely. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to zoom in with you today. So we've been very actively working on a number of different issues and following up on some of the individual requests that we've gotten through your offices as well. With the prison lawsuit, we're at a place where the special master has issued his report. We've all responded to it. Maybe you've heard, but FDC has agreed to take 100 of our state prisoners, so that's a good development, something that we added some pressure to on a number of different channels, but it looks like as of this week, that will be happening. We're handling litigation with HSTA and just continually trying to look through some of the legal issues that are coming up. Our team we have different AG teams that are set up handling different responses throughout the state. One of our teams is monitoring the COVID exemption email, and appreciate the efforts that you have undertaken and others have undertaken to try to channel some of these exemption requests to this COVID exemption at Hawai'i.gov. We've gotten over 3,000 requests for guidance or information as to whether or not someone is exempt under the orders, or just questions about all the orders as they exist. Our COVID Kokua line is another email that we've set up. Over 600 emails have gone to that. All of that, again, is in support of this email response, and we have a different AG team set up to do that. We've also really started to drill down on the CARES Act and to start taking a look at some of the legal rights.
Will now be recorded.
Okay. Our conference is now going to be recorded. Okay. The CARES Act, obviously, that's an important piece of legislation. There's a lot of money that's coming down. We set up a team of AGs who are going to be working on all the different ramifications there. We're also in contact with other attorneys general offices who have insight into this, other governors who are looking and drilling down into this. So that legal component is going to be important, and we'll be working with all the different facets that have been stood up to make sure that this money is expended effectively, but also in consideration with all the pots of money that do exist. So our office, the department, also administers a number of grants. We administer the burn grant, for example, so that's federal money that we want to be sure is expended appropriately and in conjunction with how this CARES Act money is going to be expended. We have a meeting on that today. Our EP team of attorneys general have been set up too. We're working on all the different iterations that have come down through executive orders and EPs, and there will be more, as I'm sure you know. So that's been a system that's been in place. And then, of course, we've just been daily working with our different counterparts in the counties, federally and otherwise. We worked a number of the forms that are being utilized right now at the airports after we got input from the prosecutors, got input from the police officers, police departments about how to make those more effective enforcement tools. So the forms that we currently have in place now, which are filled out by every traveler that comes into the airports, are, we think, very good enforcement tools. They provide the kind of knowledge and acceptance of responsibility that we provide the kind of probable cause we need for arrest, and also to ensure that these are prosecutable offenses. So that's sort of a very brief summary of some of the things that we've been working on, and happy to take any questions as to any of those items or anything else that you'd like to talk about.
Questions, members? Any questions? I just wanted to follow up. Yes, go ahead, Senator Keohokalole.
Thank you, Attorney General. The first question I had was related to a discussion we had about foreclosure and eviction relief last time. Can you on the emergency provisions. It appears, for lack of a better term, that the emergency proclamation the governor signed was not self-executing, and so will there be further action taken by this administration on foreclosure and eviction relief? Because it seems like the only provisions with teeth are the judiciary shutdown and refusal to hear those eviction and foreclosure actions, but that doesn't prohibit landlords or banks from initiating those actions and then just taking them up when we phase out.
Right, fair enough. So after the last meeting that we had, we put together a single page summary of the existing rules that govern evictions, rent increases, foreclosures, mortgage payments. I think there's two things, as you correctly pointed out, Senator, that are creating confusion. One is that by virtue of the declaration of emergency, once the first emergency proclamation was issued, there were two provisions that were automatically activated. And so they were not specifically set out in the emergency proclamation, which just generally referenced 127A-30, but they were activated once the emergency was declared. And those two provisions are 127A-30-30A2, which says that no landlord shall terminate any tenancy for a residential dwelling in the area that is subject to the proclamation except for a breach of the material term or agreement. Now, of course, non-payment of rent is a material breach. So at the present time, if you don't pay your rent, that, as you said, you could be subject to eviction, which requires a court process. And presently, as we know, the courts are not hearing matters unless there's some kind of emergency call to hear a matter until after April 30th. The second provision that was also automatically activated was 127A-30B. And that basically says that that rent cannot be increased, right? And I think it was correctly identified that this is also in the same provision that deals with the commodities. But the idea is, in an emergency, we're not going to be increasing rents unless the increase was pursuant to some kind of pre-existing rental agreement or lease agreement or something like that. But during the period of emergency, we're not going to be engaging in price gouging. We're not going to be increasing rents beyond what was already agreed to. So those were automatic provisions. The Office of Consumer Protection, which has the Landlord Tenant Information Center, which is handling a number of inquiries, has tried to do a lot of public messaging. I know Steve Levins, the executive director, has been on HPR. He's been working with the governor to get messaging out there. There's a website that's available. They also have a phone line that's available. But I do think you're right that there will need to be some additional actions taken, and I believe that the governor is intending to do that. We're working with DCCA, OCP to address some of what people might expect to have happen on May 1, right? Because I think that's everyone's concern. There's also
what are the potential options on the table for the governor to take? It seems like some other states, governors leverage their emergency declaration not to actually force banks to do anything, but to come to agreements on foreclosures. But are there any particular specific legal actions that the governor could opt to take to address this?
Yes, there are, and other states have done this. I mean, again, he could, I believe, suspend 666, or he could basically say that there won't be any evictions, right? And I know that some states have done that for a period of time. And that material breach language could mean that if you don't pay, then you don't have grounds to evict anyone. That's an action that other states have taken, and that the governor could contemplate and could take here. Again, this does, as you suggested, interface with the federal moratorium, right? So that's an important aspect of this too, is if you have a federally backed mortgage, you're a landlord. You have a federally backed mortgage, and 40% of our mortgages in the country are federally backed. You can't take certain actions to evict your tenants because you're subject to that moratorium. So some of those things play into this as well, which is, as you suggested, why there's a conversation going on between the banking industry. And most of that conversation is happening with DCCA, with Director Alkumi. So I'm interfacing at the level that you suggest might have to be necessary, which is if we're going to issue another executive order or if there's going to be another emergency proclamation. But in terms of some of those other conversations that are happening, I think Director Alkumi is more up to speed on that.
So there's no sort of threshold of evictions and foreclosures that need to be met before the administration could be compelled to act one way or another?
Not that I'm aware of. There's nothing in terms of quantity. I think it's really just a policy decision, right? So, and I think a lot of that feedback is probably coming in through OCP, through their tenant advocacy center and their landlord tenant information center. So that's probably where those policy decisions will be driven.
Based off of how many people actually end up thrown out of their rental arrangements or potentially engaged in foreclosure actions. Okay.
Right. I think they have a good handle on what that might look like and what the governor might want to try to do to exactly forestall that type of occurrences come May 1.
How often do you guys revisit that?
Sorry, Senator, what was that?
Oh, how often do you guys revisit that?
Daily, multiple times a day, actually. We basically have sort of a running conversation that we've set up through our department where our deputies who advise these subject matter areas, including DCCA, will basically be in constant conversation about what needs to be amended, what needs to be additionally suspended, what additional action has to happen. And then we sort of filter that and decide if it should be through an EO or if it should be through an EP. And then the other way that I top down that is not just working with General Hara and working with the governor, but also working with the directors so that we're sure that we're catching things from both sides. So that's happening every day, lots of moments of the day, in fact.
Okay.
So you folks are ready to execute some of these things in the event that there is enough of a public hardship, I guess is what it's going to take for the administration to take action on some of these measures. You folks are ready to execute some of those things.
Yeah, well, definitely. We have a lot of the language we've thought through with Director Awapuni, with General Hara, and yeah, we're at various stages of being able to issue it when and however that becomes appropriate on the policy level.
Okay, good. Because I have some questions related to the emergency proclamation as it applies to suspension of collective bargaining for repurposing of personnel. But I'll defer back to the committee for other questions. Thank you.
So I just wanted to follow up on the evictions. Are other departments like public housing or HMS prepared for an increased number of how they're going to be able to assist people who are evicted? And said, what I'm trying to figure out is what's your benchmark before you start to enact some of the things you're talking about, and are we prepared to deal with the consequences of a delay?
That is a good question, Senator. What I'm prepared to do is to issue the necessary EO and the necessary EP so that those types of loopholes or those types of additional actions can be activated as soon as necessary. So in terms of the threshold and those policy matters, I'm not 100% privy to that, but I'm doing all the legal part to be able to execute whenever and however the subject matter agencies and General Hara and the governor decide that needs to happen.
Okay, so are you involved in any of those conversations on how we can provide the additional safety net in the meantime, as there may be an increase in evictions?
On the specific level, on this specific issue, I would say probably OCP and DCCA is probably running more point on that, but we are privy to a lot of the conversations, right, because we do advise those agencies. So I believe a lot of the deputies who are directly advising their subject matter areas in this particular matter are probably privy to that. And I'm making sure that I'm at a place where I'm getting, when the directors feel it's necessary to come and talk to me, that I'm open and able to address it, and then when it's coming from the deputies that we have a channel here. So we're, as I said, constantly revisiting that. So if it needs to get issued here tomorrow, we're ready to do that.
Okay, no, I guess I'm not talking so much about the DCCA component. What I'm talking about is once they're evicted, because we've delayed any kind of action, is Department of Human Services and Public Housing or other associated agencies ready to deal with assisting those who are evicted in finding housing?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm sure that some of the deputies who, for example, advise DHS are aware of some of those efforts that are underway. But I personally, as I sit here now, don't know of any specific policies that are in place there. But I would think that some of the deputies in my office are aware of some of them because I'm sure they've been consulted if those kinds of discussions are happening.
Okay, I mean, I just think we would want to have some kind of clear understanding as to making sure there's some safety net available until obviously you guys decide to pull some of those triggers that Senator Keho Kalole was talking about. I'm not sure if that's all part of a plan.
Right. No, I definitely understand that. What I do know is that what OCP had been doing is they've been really trying to provide that level of clarity. And their initial advice was every renter needs to talk to their landlord because that's the first step, right? The renters need to understand and the landlords need to understand and that conversation needs to be happening because there's differences in the types of mortgages that might be taken into account when the landlords are deciding what they're going to do, right? So that was kind of the advice that was my understanding being given by OCP is that this is the time to be having those kind of conversations. Now, what you're talking about, Senator, is definitely the next level, right? If we're talking about how we're going to be providing the safety net, I think what we want to try to do is to get to a place where at least the law is clear on that sooner rather than later, right? Before May 1.
Okay, I just hope that there are conversations in regards to safety net, because like I mentioned, there's consequences on time for time when you decide to time the action that needs to be taken.
Fair enough. Okay, I understand.
Wait, Senator.
Can I ask a follow-up, please?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned potentially suspending section 666, which is the the eviction statute, right?
Yes. Let me just actually have this question.
So I'm just wondering about 667, which is the foreclosure section.
Yeah,
Have you contemplated that?
my understanding is now, and again, this would be probably better directed to Director Awakumi, but my understanding is that right now it's not as though we're not thinking about what that would mean or what that would look like, but at the current juncture, we're looking at 666, not 667. I don't actually have the document. Okay.
Yeah, I know this is obviously not your call because you mentioned, and at least these are policy determinations. But if we're going to have people collecting unemployment, then the next dilemma on our hands is going to be this overrun of eviction and closure actions. And regardless of whether the courts are closed, if they get filed, you're going to have people on the street. And so, as long as, I guess, the Attorney General's office is prepared to take action after the fact when we have massive evictions to accompany the lack of unemployment benefits, then that's the extent to which folks need to be prepared, yes.
No, fair enough. Right, fair enough. And I think, and again, Dr. Awakumi might know better, but the 667 implicates a lot of those conversations that you're talking about, right, with banks and with some of these entities that are involved in all the different pieces that are moving federally and statewide, right? So in terms of our role in this, it's really to make sure that we're clear, whether through an EO or an EP, what is being suspended and what the effect of that is. And that's all based on direct conversations we're having with the subject matter agencies like DCCA and others, DHS and others, right?
Well, just as long as we're clear that the emergency proclamation as it relates to rent, evictions and foreclosures to date is unsubstantive. It effectively doesn't do anything.
Well, the fact that the EP was declared activated those two provisions. But yes, in terms of the material breach, including now possibly the non-payment of rent, that would be something that would have to be additionally added into that card.
Okay, wait. I just want to close that before we move on. When is the administration going to make a decision on the timing, at least? Not necessarily to do it or not do it, but when to do it. When? Like,
I think it's imminent. I mean, we're working on these. We're working with all the different possible. I mean, there's a lot of things. This is one aspect of it. There's a lot of things that will potentially be a part of this next iteration of both an EO and an EP. So some aspects we're going to do separately. So it's as I said, it's ready to go from a legal standpoint, but I think there's still conversations that are happening on the policy level.
okay. So I understand that. What I'm trying to figure out is what are the deadlines and the timing of those policy discussions so we can anticipate when those decisions are going to be made.
So from my standpoint, what we're doing is we're just keeping in constant contact with everybody who's making those decisions. So,
Okay, so it's not necessarily your call. When the policy decision is made, it's not necessarily your call. It has to be, I guess, the governor's office to say, okay, pull the trigger. We're gonna. Okay.
Correct. Yes, correct. Yes, Senator. Yeah.
Okay, Senator Marwaki.
Hi, good morning, Claire. Thank you. I have one
Good morning,
follow-on question to that. So when does DCCA or the Office of Consumer Protection, they collect these? If I have a problem as a person being evicted, my landlord won't work with me, do I go to OCP and do they collect these data so that they can give you the data to know when to trigger?
Yes, they are definitely the subject matter agency on this, and they're the ones, again, they have the landlord-tenant information center. So they're the ones who are getting the calls. Again, Steve Levins, who's the director of OCP, has been doing media. He's been out there trying to clarify this as much as he can. And there is a telephone number that OCP has that is related to the landlord-tenant information center that's available. I have it. I can give it to you right now. It's 586-2634, and that's I believe it's open from 8 to 12 every day.
Can you repeat the number?
Also, oh sure, it's 586-2634. And if you go to the webpage for the Office of Consumer Protection, and specifically the area that deals with landlord-tenant, there's quite a bit of evidence, and dealing also to some of the areas that that we were discussing previously. So yes, they are the agency that is probably got the finger on the pulse of what's happening best of all of us, and we're working with them to make some of these decisions about what to suspend. And of course, banking and some of those regulated industries come under DCCA as well. So a lot of those conversations are happening with them too.
So this is beyond just informational. This is also complaints that they have against their landlord, people being evicted. Can call this number as well. Is that right?
I do know that that's largely what they do. They handle calls related to the landlord-tenant code, and they do handle complaints, and they act upon those complaints. I believe that telephone number will get you to the right place if there's a complaint to be made. But again, their website is chock full of information, and there's all kinds of complaints that OCP handles, right? Some of the price gouging that we were talking about before, they handle those complaints, they're doing those investigations. So that's all the type of resources that are available on their website.
Thank you.
Senator Kitani.
Sure.
If Attorney General, if the state is legally able to hold people in mandatory quarantine at a state-determined site, is the state also able to require them to pay for the costs associated with this quarantine?
So if I understand, Senator Ginani, your question, it's related to some of those options that are available to people who are arriving into the state, right? That if you arrive, you have to have a designated quarantine area that's identified on the various forms that you fill out. And yes, in those instances, those are facilities that those individuals have identified as being where they're going to be staying, and that's what they're going to be quarantined to under the law for 14 days when they arrive. And if they don't have an address, they're in violation of the law, they can get arrested, or they can turn back and go home. So if that's what you're referring to, then yes, under the law, we can require that those individuals who are arriving stay in that one particular facility and don't leave, don't go out, ordering food, things like that for 14 days.
Well, because of the issues we have that we are not able to track these visitors or residents who may be sick, the state has talked about having a determined site where all of these quarantine people would go. So if it's a site determined by the state, would we then still be able to charge these persons the cost associated with that?
And force them to stay.
I have started hearing some of those possibilities, i.e. all persons who arrive, be them residents, be them travelers, being told that they can stay in one of 4 hotels, for example, as opposed to the hotels that they previously made reservations at, or going home and quarantining themselves at home. So we are beginning to look at that. The expense is an issue. I know right now what's happening with respect to the option of being able to turn around and go home. There is some private money or some grant money that's available to help people who can't pay for that to buy the ticket and to go home. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more carefully, because that's still sort of one of the newer options that's being thought about. But that was raised to me yesterday as a possibility for the purpose of enforcement. What we are doing right now is we have really fine-tuned the orders that are signed at the airport, and that was done after we heard from police officers who are primarily responsible for the enforcement, talked to prosecutors. So now everybody has to put on the form that is presented to them at these checkpoints a unique identification number. So their Hawai'i driver's license, for example, is going to be on that form. So if the person is identified 2 days after leaving the airport at the beach, the officer comes up to them and says, "I see your ID," they can compare it against the information that are now on these forms, and then the identification of the individual allows us to enforce. Gives us the PC to arrest and the PC to prosecute, right? Or the means to prosecute. So that process now in terms of enforcement, I know in Kauai, they've been able to track individuals who signed the forms and identified an area that they were going to be going to, and then the officers saw them take a left instead of a right, and they were noted that they weren't going to the place that appeared to be designated on the form. They were arrested ultimately because they did not go to the location that they had identified. So there is that kind of enforcement that's happening because we've been able to really make more robust the process of identifying these individuals, right? So when they're found to be in violation, we can actually trace it back to the documents that they signed at the time they come into the state.
Thank you.
Senator Kim.
Good morning, Claire. Thank you so much for being
Hi, good morning, Senator.
A question about when they're arrested, what happens to them? They're not put into jail. What happens to them?
Right. So, for example, one instance on Kauai, an individual was arrested, and then he was told, you don't have residence, you're violating the laws. He ultimately decided to go back, and I believe he was one of the individuals who took up. I think there's at least 10 individuals that have taken up the offer to get a ticket paid for to return. So that's what happened in that instance. In terms of the second instance on Kauai, where the 2 individuals were arrested, I actually am not sure. I don't believe that they remained in prison, so they were probably released to the area that they had identified as their quarantine area, but they'd already been arrested and processed right through the system. So I think it's varying dependent on the county, but the 2 arrests that I know of, those are 2 instances in terms of what's happened. Because once they've identified that location, that's where they're supposed to be, right? So even if they're arrested and processed and then released under some kind of set of conditions, they're supposed to be in that area and then that designated location, and the police officers know where that is.
I just
and
think
can more robustly enforce it.
Yeah, people are concerned because we're utilizing our resources and wondering, because we don't want to put more people in prison because it's already crowded, so what's actually happening. But as to the 14-day quarantine, why can't we say if you don't have a 14-day reservation, then you need to turn around and go back? Can we say that? Can we do that?
Well, I think the way it's drafted right now is that if the person, family, whatever it is, intends to stay longer than 14 days, they need to have a place where they are going to be for those 14 days. If they only want to stay in the state for 5 days, that's better for us. Yeah, leave after 5 days. We don't want you to be here any longer than you need to be here. So if your trip is for 5 days,
But then we are defeating the purpose. We are saying that you're supposed to be in quarantine for 14 days because you may have the virus. And if you leave or go anywhere within that time, you could be infecting other people. So if we're saying it's okay to have a 5-day reservation, which meaning you're coming for some kind of a vacation for 5 days, then it's okay for you to get on public transportation, it's okay for you to get on a taxi, it's okay for you to travel back to the airport when you could be infected, you could be a positive case. So then you're violating the 14-day quarantine. So why do we not say you have to you cannot violate the 14-day quarantine, you have to stay here for 14 days, have a reservation. If not, you need to go back. And then we will, stop people from coming here for a mini vacation.
right? So I think there's two things to that. One, again, I think it is a policy issue. I think when we initially did this in March 30th, I think when we did it, is the idea was we wanted to discourage people from coming at all. And this was a model that New Zealand had utilized, other countries had utilized. You're going to come, you're going to be in your hotel for 14 days. You're going to have room service. You're not going to go to the beach. This is not going to be a vacation. And if you're going to leave early, we want you to leave early. I think that because if you do get sick, we don't want you to burden our resources, right? We're really concerned about our state's ability to handle sick people right now. So that was the initial reason that this was implemented, and then obviously we saw the numbers really did contract based on that policy, which is what happened in other countries, and we might be one of the only states that has been able to do it ourselves, but other countries we certainly saw that happen. So the idea that I think we've been continuing to evolve on the process level with DOT is now everybody who comes in gets scanned, right? So you get your temperature taken, so you get basically evaluated for whether you are sick, whether you are symptomatic, and whether or not you do present some kind of a health risk. So I think I do understand what you're saying, Senator. I do think that some of those policy issues might need to be ones we rethink through. But at the time we implemented this, we said we really don't want tourists. We don't want people here who are going to burden our system. So if you're going to be here for 5 days and you're good staying in your hotel room, getting room service and not seeing anything of Hawai'i, but you're going to leave after 5 days, leave after 5 days and don't be a burden on our system. But I do understand what you're saying in terms of the science behind the incubation period, and you're right that these individuals who do leave, and again, we know in the case of the Kauai couple, the police knew where they were going and kind of tracked them and understood that they, could get to their hotel and nowhere else. Can't go to Foodland, right? You have to go straight to the hotel. That we are still letting them leave the airport and go to their designated quarantine location. So there might be room to change some of those policy reasons underlying how we initially did things, but that was the policy reason when we initially instituted that.
Attorney General, I appreciate that. This committee, in fact, proposed the 14-day. We knew that we would have difficulty putting everybody into a designated area, so we agreed that the self-quarantine would prevent and act as a deterrent for tourists to come, but I believe that we had talked about it being for 14 days, because if someone's coming and they don't have the money for 14 days and only 5, they're not going to come. But if we allow other amounts of days, they're going to be coming, and that's the biggest complaint we're getting by emails from our constituents, that they see these visitors traversing Hawaii and enjoying the fact that there's no crowds, and so they're not getting caught, and they could be infecting people. Certainly they can infect the taxi driver, and I'm told that some of the airlines, one of the flights only had 7 open seats, and so people are sitting next to each other, and these people that are only quarantined for 5 days could in fact be infecting others. So we're not lessening the curve by allowing that. So I hope we will look at, fine-tuning some of the policies, because we don't have the resources and the enforcement to keep track of these short-term visitors who are saying that they're only going to stay for 5 days. We don't even have it for the 14, but we want to lessen the amount of people actually coming. So I hope you folks will take a serious look at that, please.
Okay, sure, I will definitely read that, Senator.
Senator Favela?
There's a follow-up? No. Go ahead. Going back to the governor's proclamation, I got a problem with that, because when he made the announcement, was it just, to me, did he and do you or do the department heads from other directors understand the impact that what Senator Jarrett was saying is that going to be taking place? Because it's taking place now in certain districts, especially in mine. But they have no place to go. He's telling us to call a number that's next going to be overwhelmed, just like the unemployment, because half of Iroquois Point is already having problems with electric and electric increase and rent. So those people in Iroquois Point right now in Nova Beach is already afraid, because the management company said they're not going to make no breaks and nothing. They're going to start serving eviction notices. So now we're talking about 1,100 guys living there. I mean, the magnitude that we're talking about, that once he made the governor made the proclamation. Yeah. As soon as he made that, what was the steps then? Did we wait a week? Did we go on vacation? Did all the departments decide that, hey, let's wait till they come? Again, we're not being proactive. We're not. So did the governor make that? We should have had one A to Z list on how these guys who have both parents working in the school system or from a state that is not working, don't have no income, and having all of these problems and worrying about putting food on the table, electric bill, water bill, all of these things. Then we're now saying we're going to wait to pull the trigger. And all the directors are going to make their decision. Again, we are waiting. We're waiting. Our community cannot wait. No unemployment, no income. They're not going to have a house to stay in. What I want to know, if the governor and you guys, because you say legally you're ready, but you're just waiting for here. So, but you need to ask the governor, tell the governor, are we going to wait till we have rioting in the streets, people fighting with their landlords, fighting with the mortgage companies, fighting with people in the street because they're not going to leave their house? I mean, are we going to wait for that to happen? Or are we going to be more proactive and start working on it yesterday? Because this is what we're having right now. People are emailing every one of us here, worrying now. They really cannot get food because everything is running out. Cannot get toilet paper, cannot get certain necessities. Now they're not going to have a home. I mean, this pandemic is getting sick. We live on an island. It's not like we can get in a car and drive across the state and stay with family. We only got what we got on this island. And our resources are running dry because we're still letting people come in from the mainland and say, hey, if you're only going to stay for 5 days, that's okay. How long should you go back? That was the reason. The reason was to deter any more people coming to the state. And they're sucking up our resources by playing these things. Our HPD or Hawai'i police got to go follow, babysit somebody. But if there was an emergency that HPD had to go to, Hawai'i police had to go to, we're not babysitters for the tourists. If they cannot stay here for the minimum requirement as the proclamation said, and what the governor had said, they should not be deplaning. Just like how they cannot get off the ship. If you do not have a reservation for more than 14 days, which is the law that he said, right? If you don't have the minimum of 14 days, sorry, you cannot deplane. Only residents of Hawaii. Somebody got to step up and hammer this the best way they can, because you're putting all of us in danger by not having homes to stay and taking over our resources. So please, tell the governor to pull a trigger last week, get something going with all of this so that we can have our community not emailing us and worrying about putting food on the table, paying their rent, and having some place to stay, because that's gonna cause problems. And we can foresee it. We live on an island. It affects everybody. And it wouldn't be bringing it up to this committee if it wasn't happening. It's happening now, but not as a schedule. So you guys are gonna wait till we hit a huge amount like unemployment. 100,000 people, no more homes. And then we're gonna react. That's too late. We should react now. And you should make the recommendation. Since you said you're all ready to go. You should start making these recommendations, calling these loan companies, calling the banks, calling these guys up. Somebody gotta make a phone call and let these guys know that this is a crisis in Hawaii. So please, if you guys can, pull the trigger now. Don't wait till later, because Senator Donovan is saying, when? We're asking you when. We like them today. Has to happen already, because people are already behind in their rent and behind in their mortgage. I know in my community, they're already getting notice from the mortgage companies and management companies that they're gonna evict. So they don't have nobody to call, but I'm gonna go give them this number that you just gave me, and we're gonna have 1,000 people calling this number, and they're not gonna have solutions. So we gotta have real solutions besides just a phone number.
And they're only there 8 to 12.
So I guess what you're asking the Attorney General is if she can relate to the governor to reconsider a timeline.
Yes, sir.
So if you can just urge the governor to maybe prioritize this and really figure out what the timing is going to be, and sooner rather than later, hopefully. Senator Kidani.
Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, is the state able to impose on travelers a quarantine surcharge or travel surcharge to help the state pay for the cost of monitoring their quarantine?
I'll have to look into that one, Senator, because as we know, the airports are very heavily regulated through the FAA. We get a lot of money, millions and millions of federal dollars into our airport system from the federal government, and that all comes with conditions, right? It all comes with requirements that we can't discriminate. There's, I'm sure, probably some Commerce Clause issues that are implicated, but I do understand the policy behind it. One more thing that we could utilize, if legally appropriate, to discourage people from coming, and if they do come, from having to share a cost of the burden of what we have to undertake in order to handle the fact they've arrived. So those are, as I'm sitting here handling this question now, I think those are some of the implications that I'd have to look at, because that FAA space is highly regulated. But I do understand where you're coming from, and I can certainly look into that more and follow up with you on a more detailed answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, Senator Moriwaki.
Hi, Claire again. Talking about the visitors coming in again, the tracking is important, the enforcement is important. It seems that part is a little squishy. We don't know if HTA is actually tracking visitors to hotels and not short-term rentals or people going to residences. So is there a way to provide, I don't know, in South Korea they have bracelets to at least show that they are in quarantine, should be in quarantine, and they shouldn't be on the beaches, they shouldn't be shopping. Some way to institute that for the 14-day period, and after the 14 days, go back to the airport or go somewhere to get that cut off, and when they have a date specific, maybe even a bad habit test on them so that we can know that they're clear. But something like that is once they're in our state, that we can impose some of those regulations or restrictions on them.
Right, yes, Senator, and you mentioned South Korea. I do have a team that is looking at this, because I do think we have our current situation now, which has a lot of enforcement implications, and we've been working closely with the counties, we've been working closely with the police departments, and that's why we've had a number of different iterations to these quarantine orders, and we've been just trying to perfect that process and to enable us to be able to do a better job with the enforcement issues. But I think we are going to be looking at a new reality, right? And I think the governor is certainly aware of this, that our industry, which requires so much of the travel industry to be robust, is going to continually possibly put us at in harm's way with respect to these kinds of viruses. So South Korea does have a interesting model, a 2-day the persons who come in or the persons who are identified are checked twice a day. They do it through various technologically feasible ways. So in terms of capacity and legality, I think there is an important juxtaposition there. And I do have a team that is actually looking at, in particular, the South Korea system of monitoring, looking at the legality issues that surround that, and then also looking at the capacity issues and the efficacy issues, right? How that type of technology can be utilized and how we can do it in a way that's legal, in a way that is possibly going to be a part of our sort of reality moving forward, given what we've had to experience here and given the kinds of concerns that we've had to identify. So yes, we are looking into that.
Because I think the concern was with the app that Rona Suzuki developed. She said that we weren't able to get the GPS, like locate them, because they could be leaving their room, but nobody would know. So the bracelet or some other way of enforcing and monitoring without overtaxing our police would be very helpful to look at those kinds of options as well. But I don't know if there's a policy issue involved.
Yeah, so South Korea is one model. Taiwan has a model. Taiwan's been using, as you said, the bracelets, the ankle bracelets and things. So they develop an area, and if you go outside the area you're supposed to be in, bing, something goes off and there's an alert. So there are, and I think, again, part of our new reality is going to be that not just our state, but a lot of other countries who we're kind of a little bit more synonymous with are going to be looking at these kind of technologies. And I think there is a lot out there, and we should be ahead of that curve, and we should be looking at all the possible implications of that so that when it's time to roll those things out, we can do so in a legal and effective way.
Okay, thank you.
So, Attorney General, so those inquiries are not complete yet. You don't have a good understanding of whether the state has a justifiable legal basis to quarantine individuals in a specific government mandated location like in South Korea, or whether the state has the legal basis to require an individual download a location tracking app or a bracelet that can be geofenced.
Well, so all the different three things that you just mentioned, Senator, those all have different implications, right? So in terms of quarantine, that implicates a lot of things that are already in place with our Department of Health, right? There's quarantine, there's isolation, there's the due process components to that, right? And what we've been handling, at least on the traveler's end, is we've been doing this mandatory self-quarantine. But in terms of sort of the larger reality that we'll be looking at, which is how are we going to engage in surveillance of our population more monthly? How are we going to be able to isolate people more largely? How are we going to be able to handle some of these larger policy issues are what we're trying to think ahead of the curve on. So we could give just individual advice to some of the things that are coming across our desk, and we're doing that in particular, as Senator Murakami mentioned, that is being discussed. We've looked at that, and we're looking at that for capacity and legality and those things. But I do think it's got to be a much broader inquiry into what all the different possibilities are and all the legal aspects to that, because we're trying to decide on a policy level what we want it to look like, right, and what it is that we want to do. So we're dealing with a lot of open-ended questions, but I get daily briefings on where we are with this different piece of it that's provided to us by this senator, or the governor asked about this, or so we're trying to be the crucible of that kind of analysis.
Okay. Right now HTSA says that they call hotels to make sure that the visitors are in their hotel room. If they're not there, what's the enforcement mechanism?
Right, so it's twofold, right? You call the police department, and I know that we've had some of our investigators have been called too, and then you follow up, right? And there's an enforcement mechanism that's in place, because again, if the individual's not there, what we need is evidence demonstrating where they are, or what the actual evidence of violation looks like, right? So if they're found at a grocery store, and the witness identification that they're not in their quarters because they're at the grocery store, if it's calling the hotel room, then that could be evidence itself too. So I do know that that is happening. HTA is doing it. I think the police departments are doing it, and I know that our investigators have gotten involved as well.
Okay, and so what about the those self-quarantining at home or some other location other than a hotel. Because according to the DOTAX director who's overseeing the development of the web page and the app, there's no effort right now to monitor those who are not at a hotel.
Well, what is happening is all that information gets sent to the county. And what we made sure happening is the county EOC, it's also going to the police officer. So that's part of what we're trying to do is we fine tune so that information is now in the hands of the county, which is the law enforcement primarily, to respond if they find that there is some kind of violation, or in fact, as we're seeing on Kauai, to more proactively in identifying where those individuals are and enforcing as they have capacity to enforce.
Okay, so is there an
Somebody's
agreement?
having a good time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there an agreement though with the counties to have the same type of infrastructure that HTA has currently in calling and monitoring? I'm unaware of the counties dedicating one department or one division or a group of people making these calls regularly, similar to HTA.
That I'm not aware of. What we are aware of is that the state is providing that information to the counties for enforcement purposes. I know that the HTA is making those calls too because they've advised my investigators of some instances where there have been alleged violations. So I know we're involved in that process, but primarily my understanding is the information is going to the counties so that the counties can enforce.
So how is the administration filling the gap then? Because
Sorry, what was that?
how is the administration filling the gap? Because each time we talk to a different administrator, they acknowledge that this action needs to occur, but no one said who's going to actually do it yet.
Right. Well, I think what we're doing is we're ensuring that information is properly formatted, right? That it's enforceable information that we're obtaining, that we can actually violate people as need be, arrest people as need be, prosecute people as need be, and then we're making sure that that information, and I'm privy to various email chains where we're trying to work with the counties to make sure they're getting the information on a timely basis and they're able to utilize it to enforce in their counties. So in terms of what the specific types of proactive enforcement are, I'm aware that HTA is making some of the calls, and I know that.
So who's specifically calling residents at home that are self-quarantining, who just got off the airport? I know you give that to the county, but that doesn't answer the question who's actually calling and who's monitoring, similar to HTA.
Right, and I'm not sure. I know HTA, as you said, is handling sort of the tourist industry and individuals who are at hotels. In terms of people going to their residences, my understanding is that the information goes to the counties, and the counties are running point on that.
Okay, but you said you're not sure. You don't have a clear indication that they're doing the same type of activity as HTA is.
Right, I can certainly follow up on that for you if you wish. We are involved in a lot of conversations about what the counties are doing, and I know just from anecdotal or just from information that I hear from some of these conversations how it's happening in the different counties. But
I guess it ends up becoming incomplete, because if you're filling out the web application, if you end up doing it on app, or even if you do it through the form, but no one's following up and no one's enforcing, then I don't understand what the point is here. I don't get because as was mentioned yesterday, we're paying a lot of money for the web page, and we're paying a lot of money for the maintenance of it from an outside party, but then there's no enforcement and no follow-up.
Right, so I'm just going to distinguish the two for a minute, because the enforcement and the follow-up is what we were working on with respect to the forms and making sure that we can enforce properly and that the counties are comfortable with what kind of information we're collecting and the ability to arrest and to prosecute. Now, the app is something that we're working with as well. My understanding of the app is that initially it was to be a service that was available to people arriving to Hawaii to be able to log on and provide information voluntarily. So we're now working fairly closely to see if the two can come together, and that the attributes of the app can help us also with enforcement, maybe reduce paper and that type of thing. But the most important part of these forms is the identity of the individuals. So that's the part that we have fine-tuned the county so that if they get word that there are 2 people on the beach and those people just arrived 2 days ago, they go to those people, they say, let me see your ID, let me see your passport, that identification aspect.
And I appreciate that. I guess we have 613 people not working right now, and if it could be determined which agency can help call those who are not at hotels other than HTA, and we can utilize those 613 people. I mean, some are going to go to Department of Labor, some may go to Department of Ag, but there are a lot of gaps that seem to be identified through these meetings, and we have a whole staff of people that can help fill the gaps, but we're not sure who's supposed to be connecting the dots and who's supposed to be organizing it.
Right, fair enough. And so in response to that, actually, in some of the different programs that some of the AGs I have tasked with this are looking at, we are looking at that pool of persons who could possibly be involved in this process of doing a lot of the front-end data verification and then doing a lot of possibly the tracking. So I am on the same page with you, Senator, with respect to that, and actually that very same possibility of utilizing some of the state workers, the state workers being able to be a part of that process. So yeah, I am looking into that.
Okay, Senator Kidani.
Claire, I was looking at the governor's order for self-quarantine dated March 31, 2020. And item 2B says, if you are a visitor, your designated quarantine location is your hotel room or rented lodging. To me, this goes against what the mayor for the city and county of Honolulu has ordered, because vacation rentals are not allowable.
Actually, vacation rentals are not allowable under the 3rd Supplemental Proclamation either. The 3rd Supplemental Proclamation expressly said that the only essential industries that are able to continue are hotels and motels. So short-term rentals, vacation rentals are not allowed. I think the idea behind the order, which is I think what Senator you're referring to, that quarantine order, was to say hotel or rental lodging, because that might also implicate, well, first of all, hotels, which are allowed, but also possibly timeshares or some of the other things too. So that quarantine order, though, does not change or in any way undermine the fact that under the 3rd Supplemental Proclamation, the only essential basically tourist accommodations that are allowed under the governor's proclamation are hotels and motels. And it's section 23, which says hotels and motels to the extent used for lodging and delivery or carry out food services. So in that sense, we are consistent with the county of Honolulu in that you're not supposed to be staying at vacation rentals because they're not supposed to be operating.
Thank you for that clarification, Claire.
Sure.
Senator Favela?
A couple of things. For the polling, how can we utilize 89-day hire your investigators to help with these calls to hotel rooms and to places where residents say that they're living or their destination? Because I'm looking at this paper that they got to fill out over here. There's a lot of paper. But my concern is going through all of this trouble and spending all of these resources and money. I go back to the simple fact is, understand Hawaii is in a crisis, same like the rest of the world. Sorry that we're inconveniencing you on the plane on your vacation, but you cannot come off the plane unless you're a resident. Why can't we just do that? Because all what you just are saying now, HPD or enforcement, calling this and that, that's all resources. All resources that will be simplified if I would just tell these guys nicely, don't board the plane because we're not going to let you off in Hawaii. Because we are lacking resources, which we have a governor right now that doesn't want to write a letter to our president or whatever, but ask for anything in any capacity going forward. So can we please simplify this in the simplest way as we can? Stop wasting time for all the resources of everybody else and try to gather people around. We're still having about 100 to 200 people a day coming to Hawaii. It's not working. It's $5,000 over here says you can pay $5,000 or a 1 year or both. Yeah? You know what that says to me? Huh? Blah, blah, blah. You know why? Because we're not going to do that. Again, we don't have any room. You think the tourists don't know we don't have room in our prisons? And how are you going to collect the $5,000 fine? They can't go to court because our courts are closed. So what are they going to do? This is the reason why the simple fact, I'm honest, I mean, I'm not trying to make a big thing about it. The simple thing is that we tell them they can't board the plane. If they like sue us later because our courts are closed. And we figure it out later. We apologize. We go up and we apologize later. Because our people are more important than this rallying what you're saying right now. HPD going to do this. They're going to fill out this form. We're going to have somebody call them. HTA. That's too much. Too much. Simple fact is right now we should be worrying about paying our people. We should be housing our people and protecting our people. That's all. Not worried about what the tourists would feel, but they will come back. They will come back. But if we do not step up and tell them, sorry ma'am, sir, you cannot come off the plane. Once we tell somebody that, nobody else will come. But if we keep letting them come 3 days, 2 days, you gotta understand, my nephew is one of those millennial guys. Yeah? When they see one cheap flight, they just jump on the plane because it's cheap. They don't know where they're going. China, Japan, they don't care because it's cheap. What do you think those guys are doing? Soon as they see a cheap flight, they're going to take the risk and come because it's an opportunity to come to some place where people stay saving for years to come. So unless we hammer this thing down seriously at the airport and say, sorry ma'am, sir, you cannot deploy, you cannot come off the plane, you need to go back, only residents of Hawaii, right? Once that happens, once one plane gets turned back like that, you watch how fast nobody else will come. But until we can have a strong hammer, instead of being seaweed in the water that's floating around when the tide is going, we ain't gonna get nobody stopping coming here. 14 Day was a joke. 14 Day was a joke. We tried to make them scared, but it was just a big boogeyman. Because it's not happening. You know, it's like how we used to skate back in the day in the ring, right? Skate at your own risk, right? You sign that paper. You know, you're still suing the skating ring. Why? Because that doesn't mean nothing. It's just a waiver. It's just a waiver. So please, put our people first. Put this forward and stop them on the plane. You watch how quick, watch how quick they stop coming. Please look into that, please. Thank you.
Okay, I just have 2 questions, but you can get back to us in writing. You don't have to answer it. You don't have to answer it now. If you can just check on the legislature's ability to vote remotely. So if and when we do get out of recess, and I think your answer could determine our timing. If that's legally possible, and what are some of the limitations, either by the current statute or the Constitution?
Sure.
And then the other question I guess I have is, yesterday the Chief of Staff had talked about the necessity for background checks for employees to have to work at different departments. You know, several weeks ago, the legislature had offered Department of Labor about 40 people. And yesterday, the Chief of Staff said that one of her concerns were that they needed background checks. So I'm not sure what that process includes, but...
Besides bullshit.
And then if as other departments move to Department of Labor, do they also have to follow a similar process of background checks, or was it only just the legislative staff? So if you can just check on
Okay, that's
that.
partly the issue that they might be handling social security numbers, that kind of thing. Is that
Yeah, but,
is that the
but
context?
what
Okay.
I guess what I couldn't get then is if the legislative staff had to do background checks, but let's say staff from the 613, the list that Riker has, but they don't have to do background.
Okay.
I don't see a consistency in how we start to redeploy people.
I understand. Yes. Yeah.
I have a
will
question.
definitely do that.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to Senator Favela's request. Has the FAA or any airport associated company or industry group made inquiries with your office as to the legality of the quarantine order, or identified their intention to pursue legal action to overturn the quarantine order?
To overturn the 14-day quarantine order?
Yes.
I am not aware that anyone in industry has sought to overturn the 14-day quarantine order. In fact, my understanding is there's obviously competing things, right? The Federal Department of Transportation, which is concerned with supply chains and commerce and things like that, want to keep things open and want to keep flights and things happening in our state. And my understanding is that industry has been behind the governor and behind efforts that he's been trying to undertake, which is to limit the preference and to limit the number of people that are coming to the state. So I think it's actually the opposite, Senator, is my understanding.
So the FAA has not, or the federal DOT has not in any way inquired into your office or intimated that they might potentially move to preempt the quarantine order?
I have had no such conversations because, as you suggest, the FAA and these grant assurances and the amount of money, we're always conscious of what the FAA may or may not do based on actions we take. But in direct answer to your question, I am not aware of any inquiries made by the FAA regarding specifically the legality and the enforceability of the 14-day quarantine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and last question, so for the Attorney General.
So Claire, just two questions, and not to be answered now, but if you can research it. One is, well, 1.5. One is the masks. A couple of weeks ago, the DCD as well as the DOH director said that masks will help in terms of spreading the infection. And they were going to be working on a policy on that, and I haven't seen a policy coming out. If you could check on that with DOH, HAIMA, and yourself working on a policy. And related to that, we see still at food establishments, people handling food at the restaurants with no masks. And at least in terms of the essential services in your proclamation, you talk about social distancing, but not about the use of masks. And I wondered whether that could be a revision to the proclamation to include masks, at least for those in close proximity to people they're serving.
And gloves, I think.
Senator, I think you've hit on a good point
Masks
because
and
part of it is
Masks
Part of-
and gloves, Senator.
Masks and gloves.
Masks and gloves for
Right.
food handlers would be very helpful to have that, amend your proclamation to include that as well for the essential services or food services.
right. And I think you've hit on the point too. The guidance on this is evolved so significantly since March 4th when the governor first issued the first EP. So there's been more guidance from the CDC. The subsequent supplemental EPs have recognized the changing guidance and the evolving guidance. And I am aware of the masks in particular. The gloves, I think, is still controversial because what we want people to be doing is washing their hands and not just wearing gloves and then spreading the disease because they're not washing their hands, right? So I think the gloves might be a little bit more, but what I've seen in terms of the CDC guidance and where we might be going on updating the emergency proclamations based on the latest information from CDC and WHO, I think we might be heading in that direction, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Claire, and my question to you regarding the, whether or not we can impose a travel surcharge for travelers coming in. when you research, I hope that you will also take into consideration, the Constitution of the state of Hawaii and the governor's right to and duty to protect its citizenship, and not just what the FAA is asking or
Yes,
demanding.
and you hit on that delicate balance. It's the health and public welfare that the governor gets to look out for, and then we're constantly making sure that we're not running afoul of something that the FAA is saying, but there is latitude as we're seeing across the country.
Thank you.
And a lot of that is going to be informed by what others are doing too. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, I never got an answer.
Quick question,
to the-
quick question.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer, just simple. On the 89-day hiring investigators, what are their duties right now?
Yeah, so they have been very actively deployed. You might have heard of the $250,000 in medical equipment and PPE that was stolen. So we have a lot of concerns about protecting our PPE supplies and our SNS supplies, our strategic national stockpile. So the investigators are part of 24-hour surveillance, law enforcement surveillance and security that's protecting those sites. They also were front and center in the security that was needed to disembark the numbers of persons that came off cruise ships, so they've been involved in that. They are also a part of ESF 13, which has been stood up officially and which is now providing the kind of county support that Senator Dela Cruz was talking about before and that we've been standing up. They're also responding to possible quarantine violations as well. And of course, they're continuing to do their investigations. The wheels of justice do not stop just because we have these types of emergency situations. So cases still need to be investigated. There's a lot of time sensitivity around it. So they have not just been working, but they have been doing a lot of additional duties on top of that to support the state's emergency response.
Claire, can you clarify, you just said that these investigators are working on the cruise ships, people that disembark. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, we had the Norwegian cruise line. They disembarked a number of individuals, and it was done with a lot of precision. They were required to have chartered flights out of the state, so they didn't actually, in legal terms, enter the state, one of the requirements. And it required quite a bit of law enforcement to ensure compliance. There were other cruise ships that have come in that have disembarked just Hawai'i passengers. A couple weeks ago, that was a really challenging security issue because a lot of passengers wanted to get off, and we were dealing with the decision that had been made not to allow them to disembark, just to allow the Hawai'i passengers to disembark.
Claire, how many investigators were utilized? What was their time spent? And was that reimbursed by the cruise line? Because that was one of the concerns we had when the governor had made the proclamation that we weren't going to let anybody disembark. After he made that, then DOT and the governor agreed to let the Jewel disembark all those passengers with the buses and so forth, which then utilized our resources, which we were concerned about. And we were told that the NCL was going to be paying for all of that, and that it wasn't going to be using all of our resources. And now we hear this, which is the reason why that proclamation, one of the reasons that proclamation was made. So when we make those things and then go back on it, it utilizes all our resources, as you're now stating. So is the cruise line going to be paying for all of those man hours that was used, or women hours that were used?
Right, and I could certainly look into that. I know that there were a number of cruise ships, right, and we handled them all very differently, and it was dependent on the circumstances that each one presented. There was a cruise ship that came, and they just wanted to be able to disembark their passengers so they could get on to commercial flights and leave the state. He said that's not going to work under our current circumstances, and so in that instance, and that's the one that created the security concern because there were people who've been on a boat for 3 weeks or more, but we allowed just the Hawai'i passengers to disembark, and that was the rule. And then the second one, the Norwegian cruise line, what happened is they had some kind of, that was originally our plan, was not to allow anyone to disembark, and then it turned out that they had some kind of mechanical failure and they were going to have to come into port, but then the condition was if we were going to allow this, nobody was literally going to be processed into our state. They were going to get on these buses, and then they were going to be chartered to a separate part of the airport, and they were going to be taken And my understanding is that they footed the cost, but as to your specific question regarding how they footed the cost, I can certainly confer with DOT on that and find out more
Yes,
specifics.
if you could give us a report and the resources that we utilize, because that's exactly what we were trying to avoid when that policy went into effect. So thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have our very hardworking and I guess doesn't sleep Director of Labor, Director Murakami. So you have a presentation here?
Yeah, well, I was gonna make some opening
No,
remarks.
you can. Yeah, go ahead.
And then, but what I was gonna do is actually a live presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
So
that's
that
fine.
people can see. I hope this will try to,
Some of the masks you can hear better through them than others.
So can you hear me? Is it okay?
Everybody can hear.
I'm okay. I don't know about the people at home.
That's the mic, the main mic is right there in front of you, not the small one.
This
on the
big
table.
one.
Oh, that
That's the
big
big
one.
one, yeah.
So
You have to turn it around?
You don't want to speak loudly to that, and then I believe Senator Hill Colole can hear through the mic on the TV.
You have to turn that mic around?
Would you like me to turn?
No, that mic is super sensitive.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
But
Thank you for your
Claire
time.
was having a
allowing me-
hard time hearing us.
That's a different mic, so I gotta fix that issue.
No.
after.
When they talked, she was still doing
That's a
this.
different mic.
No, so this is for Olelo. For Claire, she has to hear the mic on the TV.
Everybody on TV goes
Oh.
like,
So it's,
yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we're having to figure this out. Sorry.
Okay.
Multiple mics.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time today. So to begin with, I just wanted to start by thanking Ideali, our staff, especially those who have been reassigned to assist with the UI filing claims. I also wanted to thank our partners who have been working. All of these people have been working over weekends, over holidays, really to help our community in this most historic time of need. I also wanted to say thank you to the many businesses and people for their support, especially your kind words, their emails, and the food that they sent to us. That was really something truly, truly appreciated. I wanted to share with you folks that this isn't easy work that the UI people do. It's hard because, it's more than answering telephones. It's more than doing those kinds of things. It's making sure that we receive accurate information from people who are very, very concerned about their situation, that we respond to them with compassion, that we input and process their information both timely but in a really diligent way to ensure that we provide the maximum benefit that somebody is entitled to while maintaining the integrity of our system so that we don't cause increased costs to our businesses on the back end. So today I just wanted to share with you some of the things that we've accomplished since our last meeting on the 9th of April. As I shared with the committee last time, we're moving into a third phase of our initiative, which is really trying to improve the communications that we've done. We've tried to accelerate the processing time. We are seeing a reduction in the number of filings that we're having, which allows us to focus more on the claims. So I'm going to start by talking about the call and claim center. So I did want to say a special thank you today to the Hawai'i State Library for their support. This morning we did go by to visit, and they have started up within the main library our first claim center there.
Wow.
They did have, I believe, 9 staff working this morning, getting trained, getting all of their passwords set. We'll go back a little. I'm going to try to get back there a little later today to see how they're doing. Again, I think they're going to be making a public announcement about it sometime today, but I did want to say thank you very much for that. I also wanted to share some news with you. Over the Good Friday weekend, we had a discussion with DAGS and the Hawaii Tourism Authority. And I wanted to let you know that our target date of Tuesday, April 21st will be a date that we're trying to launch a new call and claim center at the Hawaii Convention Center. This was made possible thanks to the support again of Chris Tatum, Keith Regan from HTA and their staff, for our comptroller, Kurt Otaguro, and his staff, because it wasn't just the availability of the location. We also needed to find computers. So HTA is providing 20 desktops, as I understand, and then Kurt reached out to the state procurement office to see if they had some surplus machines. So I think they're getting us about 30 plus machines. Hawai'i Telecom is completing a walkthrough today with our IT people. And this call center, we want to make it a real true call center that has greater capability than we've had in the past. The ones that we've set up were really short term. We just had to get it up and running. So clearly it's caused some confusion to the public, but it was what we could do with the limited resources that we had at that time. The idea is eventually that if you can imagine this, and I'm sorry I didn't draw an illustration, but you'll then be able to see that we have capabilities of processing claims, and as well as processing claims at our current location at Punch Bowl Street. We'd have the ability to process claims at the library and the ability to do it at the convention center. The reason this is important is because the nature of COVID-19 and the pandemic is if one of those locations are done, everybody gets quarantined and we can't do the work. And so having it distributed in this way is much more effective for us. So we're looking forward to, again, next week, Tuesday, to be able to officially launch this call center and claim center. I did want to also share with you other things that we've accomplished. You know, last time there was a lot of confusion about, so can't we make it easier so that claimants understand how to file? And I'm happy to let you know that we've done a step-by-step guide for filing. It's on our website, and I'll show that to you shortly. But it shows the 4 steps of what you can do. And Senator Kidan, I'm sorry I didn't explain this well, but yes, there are 2, as Doug shared yesterday. There is a form that we file as well as our UI portal. Those are 2 different vehicles that people can then file their UI claims. And I apologize for not making that clear, but the step-by-step guide shows the community how you can use these things to better file not only your claims, but your weekly or your bi-weekly certifications. Last time I mentioned that we would be setting up 3 new email addresses that would allow the public to address particular problems that they're having with the claim. I'll show that to you as well. We have been able to set that up, and the reason why it took a little bit of time was that we had to make sure on the back end we knew who was receiving it. So we have each island actually doing, each UI office on the islands focusing on particular types of challenges, and you'll be able to see what those email addresses are. The other thing that we did was at 10 a.m. this morning, we launched the new claim status inquiry portal. And so if you remember the situation with the mainframe is that it was getting all of these calls to it, continuously getting hits. So we monitored the traffic as to what was really coming in. And there are 3 types of things that need to happen, right? There are new filings that people do, there are certifications that people do, and then there are inquiries. And all 3 of these things hit the mainframe. So when we analyzed that, about 85% of the calls that were being made or the types of hits that were coming in, we believe to be inquiries. So that's what was clogging people and who couldn't file then their weekly certification, which was causing confusion and concern that I wouldn't get my back pay. Will I get my back pay? So at 10 a.m. this morning, we launched a claim status inquiry portal. Basically what it does is it captures the data on the mainframe regarding the claim status and puts it into a different environment. And basically what happens at that point is the claimants then can hit this web service instead of hitting our portal, thereby leaving the portal available to process in weekly certifications. So again, that was launched at 10 a.m. this morning, and I'll be happy to show you how it works shortly. I did want to give you a quick update about payments, because the bottom line is we need to get money out to the community. So to give you a sense of where we're at, for the month of March, we paid a total of $15,607,000. As of April 13, 2020, we paid $20,225,845 in benefits. Last week alone, we paid $11,000,000 $180,974, which was a 230% increase over the average weekly payments that we make in March. Yesterday alone, we paid $7.7 million, which is a 372% increase on the average amount that we paid on a Monday. So the things that we did to kind of streamline the systems that I spoke about last time, we believe are starting to help. I realize that's not enough, that we're trying to do more. But again, it's a good sign to see that the money is going up. The last time you asked me about some specifics on the updates on the federal programs. So I did want to provide you with some updates as to where we are now. So the $600 plus up, we've completed the development work on automating this process. As I shared with you before, when we paid an additional $25 plus up before it was done manually, but we were able to automate the process. The application is currently being tested, and our target date for rollout is this Friday, the 17th. What that translates into when you take into the time lags for HCH processing is that we anticipate claimants having check in hand for the additional $600 by next week, Wednesday, the 22nd of April. Regarding the 13-week extension, we currently have that project in development. This would again take the benefit period from its current 26 weeks to 39 weeks. Our target implementation to go live with that is April 30th. Now, PUA, which is the expanded base of unemployment assistance for sole proprietors and 1099 contractors, that one is a little tricky. But we do have a target implementation date of early May. Now, the reason why this one's tricky is that we have to create a separate environment. We, again, want to automate this. We don't want to have to do it manually, particularly given the situation with COVID-19. So we are working with a couple of contractors to get their assessment on how best to do this. But what we are looking at doing is creating a separate region on the mainframe to process it. So we mirror the environment. But on the employment verification check, instead of going to hit the employer quarterly data that we receive, it'll hit the 1099 tax base as well as the state self-reported tax data. So we did have start conversations with the tax department on the availability of that data and our ability to use it. So there are clearly a number of things that we've tried to do. As I shared with you last time, on April 7th, we started the third phase of the changes that we've made to what we've been doing, and it was really to focus on improving our communication. I do apologize again to the public for the confusion that some of the things that we did early on forced us into a situation where we would like to have communicated more effectively with people, but we just had to do what we had to do. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions? Senator Kim.
A couple of things. First, is this all affecting the neighbor islands as well? Because I've been getting emails that they said Maui is really bad.
Yes, ma'am. All of these services now, we're centralizing all of the services so that they can call any of our offices. From the time this broke out, they weren't limited to calling just their office. They could call any one of our offices, and the instruction we gave the staff was you will help them no matter where they call from. So yes, it is going to benefit the neighbor islands as well.
And I appreciate all of these changes and all of this improvements, and I'm sure the public, but right now they're still very frustrated. I'm just going to read this one so you can understand what we're getting and how gut-wrenching it is. So this is just part of the person's email. I've cut out some. It says, fast forward to now, where my application inquiry now has 1 week stating I'm disqualified, 2 weeks saying pending, and most recent certification stating filed. But what makes me more upset is that a worker by the name of Blank called me on the 1st of April stating that I needed to call her back by the 3rd or I'd be denied benefits. I've since called her daily and left 4 messages 4 times out of decency to others who may be trying to contact her. Today made 7 days straight since I tried to contact her, and she picked up my line after I flooded her line with 19 calls in a row. She yelled, call the main line, and hung up. I called again, trying to explain that I was returning a call. She said she wasn't my worker. After calling the main line 136 times, they said they weren't able to help and wait for the worker. Do you see my frustration yet? So I just read that only so you can understand how frustrated. These people, I get frustrated when I'm on hold or get, you know, when I'm calling the airlines or when I'm calling about a charge bill. And so can you imagine they're calling for their livelihood and they're getting this?
Certainly, yeah. And it's more than that. And we get those calls in our office too. And, you know, people are asking the same questions, which is why we're trying to do these things because, you know, and I'll show you again in a second, the claim status and inquiry portal. So what we're looking at is that a lot of people are just calling about the status of their claim. So if we can offload that from the phone bank, then yes, we would be able to provide greater individualized attention as opposed to just going in. Because we do get some people who call quite a bit of calls, and we go in, we check their status and explain to them. They're very grateful for it.
And I know your staff is pressured and your staff is stressed as well. So I know that, you know, it's not helping them either. So, you know, it's a difficult time. But the 18 workers, yesterday, you folks got 18, right?
Yes, that's
workers
correct.
from the list of non-essential at home. Now, those 18 are temporary? They're going to be trained and only work for 1 week?
That's
is that what the new
that's what my understanding is, that they are rotating. Some will stay. I don't know how many.
But why? Why would it be only for a week?
You know, at this point, I'm just really happy to get relief. I don't know. But I can tell you that it has helped. I will tell you that, like I started
Wait
off.
a minute. You don't know you're getting these workers for only a week and you don't know why? I mean,
No,
why
that's
would you-
because that's a Riker question, I think.
No, but he has to tell Riker what he needs, and why would they switch him out? After you train somebody, why would you switch him out and train new people?
I don't know how to answer that because we're just receiving these people. So again, you know, my concern really is.
Riker basically said, here, I can give you 18 for now, but you might only have them for a week. Bye.
Yeah, and quite honestly, at this point, Senator, I'll take it.
I know, but I'm just saying, isn't it more efficient that you get them for longer than a week? Because now they're going to sit
Could've
in
had
20
40
more
employees for
on
3 weeks,
Monday, and from what I understand, and those 20 has to be trained again. Right?
So it's the training, like I shared with you last time, you know, it's pretty, we run through it and it doesn't take that long.
But it still
but
takes time.
then the proficiency is, I think, where you're getting at. And there is an issue with that. Again, you know, we are looking at other sources, like, for example, the library. And part of it is, I'm trying to get personnel whichever way we can that can help us. And I think Riker understands the situation we're at, or we're in, and they are working with us to try to get us the staff that we need. We need to get them in an orderly way so that they can't, you know, they don't just flood us right. Because that's, and then also, you know, I shared with you that the work is really hard. So we did have 3 people of the 18 that just were reassigned because it just wasn't for them. So we do realize that with the staff that we're receiving from DHERD, that there will be some staff that would be reassigned from our capacities as well, because there are issues about accuracy, and it's even more frustrating for a claimant if somebody is there and then you know does the information and it does it wrong, and then the claim's wrong, and then right, because it causes this cascading effect on people. I mean, even if you listen to the individual who shared that email with you, they're clearly not only upset about the ability, not the limitations of the filing or the challenges they run into that, but the way in which they're treated. You know, I can assure you that to the extent possible, we've helped our people understand that, you know, it's very important to understand the situation that they're going through. I mean, we've actually done research on, you know, making sure we have the numbers available for things like
So how many
suicide
people
crisis.
do you actually need right now? How many people do you need?
So I believe, well, we still have the request for 58. We do need the 58, but we need to ramp them up in an orderly way. So for example,
But initially it was 87, right?
was it?
And then you got, I thought you had,
Okay, no, the 87 are the ones that we redistributed. Well, the total that we redistributed.
yeah, but then you had some of your guys fill some of those pukas.
Right. So it was. Yeah, I can't remember.
Right?
38, 38
Okay,
for
but you need 58 right now.
Right now.
In what
So,
what
but-
increments, or
so,
how
yeah.
far apart?
So I believe we're looking at doing it in increments of 20, but we're waiting to see what happens with with the convention center, right? Once it starts rolling up, and would it be possible for us to then schedule rotating shifts? Because part of the challenge too is if I spread it too thin, right? This is a really balancing act because at every location that I have to have UI trained staff to be able to respond to the claims and those sorts of things. So if I have too many distributed staff places, then I have too few staff actually processing claims. So that's what the trade-off is, right? That's kind of the balance that we're playing with ensuring that we don't have the exposure from coronavirus, but at the same time, making sure that we can increase the leverage the amount of people that we have coming in. So we do need 58. I'm trying to remember. Sorry, I didn't bring my other folder with me, but
So can you train 58 at one time?
not at one time.
How many can you train at one time?
Roughly about, I'd say about 20 is a good number. And it depends on what they do, right? Because some of them, we'd like to provide some relief to the people on the phones. But we also need people in claims, which is why, more than anything else, it's the time that's important, right? It's the time in which we can quickly, you know,
Yes, and that's why we're trying
Yeah, I
to get
understand.
you
Understand.
folks those
Yes.
bodies.
Right.
And we want to get you more than you need.
right?
Yeah.
Because so then you can relieve some of the people.
And I
So
appreciate
to
that.
only get 20 Monday, when the rest of this week, if we can get you more, and we've
Right.
been trying to tell Riker to, get the 600 of them, get at least half of them ready, because you're going to need them at some point.
Right. So there is a queuing process, and that queuing process can expand as other capabilities come up, right? So for example, especially if we can get we can do multiple shifts at the convention center, then I have security there. But I can queue that up. You see what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's not just, we're looking not just at location, we're not just looking at skill, we're not just looking at service, we're also looking at shifting it out, right? And putting backup. For us, I have to tell you, our people literally are working like almost every single day. And so some of our UI offices, they're like our office. We had one day off in March. And I can only imagine for them the burnout they have if they're talking to people who clearly are emotionally concerned about their, rightfully so, but it's tough on them, right? So, my first concern is again for our staff and for our claimants, and what is that balance? to
Yeah, and we
properly
want the
strike
people
it?
to know that, because some of the emails are saying, they should be working on weekends and they should be working at
Right.
night, and they don't realize that they in fact are working
That's true.
at those times. And we want to relieve
Right.
them, and that's why we've been
Right.
concerned about
Sure.
the 600 plus people that we have there that can be deployed and should be deployed. I'm sure they want to help as well,
Right.
to get them into the system, but it's not happening quick enough. So we're trying to help us to
Yeah,
help
and I
you.
really do appreciate that.
So this library claim center,
Yes.
how many people, and what the hours of that claim center?
So
is
it's,
gonna be?
right now, they're just processing claims for us. So we have, I think, it runs during the normal state hours, so 7:45 to 4:30. There are 10 people, nine people were there this morning, but it has a capacity to do 10.
10.
Um,
Okay, and that's just, no, they're not seeing anybody, they're just processing.
Yes, they're just processing, they're inputting claims, doing monetary checks, making sure that
And
their data
those
is
people
correct.
are from the list,
Yes.
and they're gonna be only there for 1 week?
No.
Oh, that's
Oh,
the-
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the list of claims that we have. Those people are from the library.
They're the librarians?
They're the library staff. There's a mix of some librarians, some other staff.
Those are people that's on the 600 list of librarians, because we have a whole bunch of librarians.
So yes, they did come from that list because when the library approached us to support us in this effort, it was after I believe they submitted the list to DHER. So I believe we've either completed, sent DHER, or will send DHER a list of who else has come in through this library channel, because we want to make sure that they understand that these people are helping us.
Thank you very much.
I just had a real quick question. How are you getting equipment and supplies for the different centers? Because one of the concerns I had heard was you have to, as you're ramping up these facilities, there's a lot of logistics that you're coordinating, right?
Correct.
Are you borrowing from other departments, or do you guys have to special order equipment?
So the main thing that we've been special ordering is our phones. So those have been coming in with Hawaiian Telecom. I will tell you for the computers, for the sandbox, we did need computers, and the Hawai'i Community Foundation provided those machines for us. They went out and they actually bought Chromebooks for us. Because it was what happened with the library moved all of its, and this was their staff. Our staff just went in to kind of help them with the image and the VDI, but their staff actually moved it around. They showed us the location. We thought, okay, this is a nice location where they have, can't remember, it's on the second floor. But their staff actually came in and moved everything around, worked with our staff to make sure that the connectivity to our system was available. But it's their computers. They moved it around for us just based off our spec. For the situation in the convention center, HTA offered us 20 systems. They offered us other things like printers and that type of infrastructure and equipment. And then what happened was when Kurt and I were talking about the situation, he actually reached out to the procurement office, and asked if there was anything in surplus. So they went around, looked around, and were able to get us 30 plus machines. So we're going to go out and check it out, make sure that we can set up the necessary VDI information. So it's actually everybody kind of working together to pull all these different pieces of it.
So no one's sharing computers.
No, not unless we do that rotating shift.
Yeah,
At this
yeah.
point, nobody's sharing computers.
Okay. Senator Marwan.
I really appreciate all you've done in the last week, and know that you're doing a lot. But when I looked at the kinds of work you needed done, the coding, and then there's a call, and now you have the inquiries, is there any way of separating it out so the people who are really panicked are the ones that can't get in and just get confirmation to know I'm in the system?
Right.
Is there any way of just getting them in the system and the certification sort of on another track?
So that right now, let's see, what's the best one? And I'll show you, when I show you the claims inquiry system, we believe that that's going to take a lot of load off of the call centers and
The inquiries.
the inquiries, because these are people who just cannot, they cannot get confirmation.
They're excited.
So
Okay, you
once
know
we
what,
get
then why don't, you can just finish, just hold that thought real quick. After this question, we'll allow you to do your presentation, because that might answer some of the questions that people may have, and then we can go back to questions. So go.
Okay, so that we think will have the natural byproduct of eliminating a lot of the concerns about what is the status of my claim, along with some of the messaging issues that came up last time that we talked about, which we're trying to address. And part of it is making sure that we're not talking the UI language, right? Because what you saw in some of the feedback in the messaging that came out from the emails and the filing situation was really the UI language, right? And so my challenge with them has been, it's got to pass the Scott test, right? Because I don't understand it. And then if I don't understand it, the community's not going to understand it. So hopefully this will show you, what we've been able to do. So this is our home page. So as I was sharing with you earlier, we wanted to put up a Q&A that actually explains to the claimants step by step how do you file a claim. So it has frequently asked questions about eligibility. This is the normal way of filing our UI claims, which is step 2. As well as the form. So you have 2 ways of filing, either through the form or through our portal, and the portal is the video. And then if you go through the web form, you still need to create a user account and password, which is step 3. And then step 4 goes through a presentation on how to actually certify your claim. So that's the first thing. And I'll go, we can come back to it, but I'll just quickly highlight some of the other things that we've done. The second thing is that down here, you'll see the additional email addresses that we have. And see, like, for example, this is an example that, right, backdate. So what I was telling the staff, that's kind of a UI term. I don't know what that means. So we put in descriptions as to what that actually means. But we're also looking at, and you'll see through the claims check process, that these emails are linked to that. So when you get to that point, if your concern is, hey, I didn't qualify, why was I disqualified? There's a link where you can click on the claims inquiry portion. Let's see. I did want to show you this. This is the inquiry portal for looking up your claims. So again, it's right on our website, and all the individual has to do is put in their last name, email address, and their social security number. When they check on their claim status, it'll actually tell them what their claim status is. So this is why everybody's coming in now. They're trying to find out what is the status of their claim. So it helps them to better understand, okay, this is what our claim is. We are still kind of working on the messaging, because once in a while that UI language slips in and it's not Scott-proof, which, yeah.
What is the answer to that question? Do they say you're disqualified? What are the answers?
To which question?
Check my claim status, so they put all that stuff in?
Right, so they
and
put their name, their last name, their email address, their social security number.
And it tells you
And
where
it
you're
tells
at.
us what the status is of
So
their
you
claim.
could say disqualified, and they
It
can go
could
back
be,
to
and
the-
then there's
email.
a link that says click on here and email us, right? So boom, it'll take them to the disqualified one. And the disqualified emails, all of the disqualified emails go to one location, one of our UI centers, which of course I'm going to forget where it was, but one of our neighbor island offices, right? So then that office just focuses on the disqualified. Because a lot of times the disqualified could be because the claimant had previously filed a claim for unemployment. They might have been disqualified, and the disqualification date hasn't turned out. So things of that nature that we can specifically address, quickly fix it, and then help the claimant respond back to the claimant directly through that email address. Because what was happening is our regular email address was just getting inundated. So somebody was actually sorting it this way. So we thought, well, we should have the community sort it and help us in that respect. So yeah, those are the changes that we've made. Also, you know, there are a lot of frequently asked questions that we receive, and we've been answering through our site. Is that
Right.
it's back there too. So there are questions here, and they can get it on our website as well. So you know, there is a lot of information here, and you know, I know it's not individual personal relief that we're providing at this point, but the reason why we implemented this was that we believe this will again alleviate the traffic. The claims inquiry portal is available 24/7, which they were not able to check before because of the maintenance that needs to happen on the mainframe that Doug explained much more eloquently than I do. But it allows at least that 24-hour check that people can check on their claims on.
And is there a live body they can actually call? Is that the call center,
That's
the
the
one that
call
goes to the branch offices, or it just goes to a central?
So they can call both. They can call both our central line, because the call center that we set up was in addition to the normal call lines that we have. So our staff are still answering those call lines.
And that's just the normal business hours?
Yes, at this point, yes. With
7:45?
the exception of holidays and weekends. Saturdays, I should say, because we need to have them take a break.
What is the normal number of claims that get processed daily?
You mean-
Average? Recently, I mean, with this COVID-19.
Oh, with COVID-19, you know, that's really difficult. I'm trying to you guys asked me that question last time too, and I'm trying to find out what's a better way of measuring it, because I cannot, once a claim goes in, there's no way for me to aggregate it by, let's say, one day and say how many were processed, because we have so many people just working on the monetary process,
So you don't have a list by dates as to when they filed a claim?
Not at this point. I'm trying to. I have a list of when they filed and when we ingested it, but I don't have a list of once it gets into the system and we're doing a follow-up. I'm trying to find a way to get that data.
Yeah, so
that
what I'm looking for is if we have a list of when they filed,
Right.
that would be the initial time they went in and
Exactly.
filed. Most of them probably tried for a week or 10 days, but at least that's when they got in.
Right.
So that's what I want to know, is the amount of claims that are filed in a day or the computer is accepting in a day.
Yeah.
Because if it's if they're able to get on the computer 24 hours a day, and I mean, I don't know what the average was before, but if you're, doing 10,000 a day, is that capacity, or are you still having issues of people getting in? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right, yeah, and I think we'll get a better idea once this runs for a little bit, but I still am looking for that data, because it comes out in just one big mainframe report, and then what happens is they disseminate it to our claims processing area, and then they go to work attacking it. I think, I don't know if I answered this question for you fully, Senator Milwaukee, but the way there are different skill sets that we are looking for, not only with DHERD, but also when we work with libraries and other people, right? And so there are 3 levels that we look at. Just people who key punch the data, right? Key punch it accurately, which is one skill set we look at. The second thing we look at is making sure that they can actually go and validate the monetary data, that the right person is in the right employer data set and those sorts of things. And the third one are all special types of inquiries that we have. And we do have different people. We're very lucky because a lot of the divisions and attached agencies within our department stepped up. That's what gave us the 76 additional staff to reassign or reallocate. And so we have a variety of skill sets that are working on that for us now.
I'm just thinking the coding and that kind of thing can be done sort of at night or, asynchronously, I guess, because you're just typing stuff in, right? You're not having to call anybody, and whether you can segregate so at least the filers get in to get confirmation.
And the other thing I did want to mention to you folks, just so that you have, an assurance that we are being fiscally prudent as well. All 76 people now that we have on board, so the ones, all of them that are working for UI are getting paid through federal funds. So we're doing an above base payment to all of the people that are working throughout our department from the federal UI dollars, right? So it offsets the general fund costs. So make sure that we're being fiscally prudent in the manner in which we do this.
That's why you should double your staff so they can get help quickly, plus it takes that payroll off of our state general fund and into the federal funds.
Yes, ma'am.
And maybe a separate shift,
That's right,
a night shift, because that's when people are trying to
Yes,
get on.
the part of the challenge too, I was really looking forward to starting second shifts, right? And we had talked about that, I think, in a variety of different settings, but part of the challenge too is that I have to get a safe central location now, because otherwise I got to get security all over the
An
place.
HTA, a new HTA.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. It's much more secure. So, and at first, I really got to thank Kurt, because when I called him on Friday, he told me, why not use the convention center? And I thought that was going to be a quarantine location. He said, no, you don't even need it. Should I talk to them, right? And then that morning, we got in touch with Keith and Chris Tatum and Keith Regan to talk to them about it. They're very, very supportive. They really were like,
And there are a lot of different meeting rooms, so you can be running 2 or 3 different call centers in different rooms.
You're right, and that's what we had envisioned with the library as well, because they have multiple floors. So I can have 1 or 2 staff going between floors answering questions, because, I'll give you an example of this, so you can picture it. But in the sandbox, we have 2 staff answering questions, right? One group calling people, another group fielding the calls that are calling in. There is like a line of chairs waiting to talk to that one guy. And people are on hold because that one person is the one person with the answers and access, right? Which is why, when I talk to them, when I talk to the people in the call center on Friday, they were telling me, you know what, if at all possible, don't rotate us out, because our plan was actually to rotate them out. But they told us, at least we can answer some questions now. We're not being such a burden to that one staff member, right? Because they go through, again, the proficiency and the learning curve. So fortunately for us, they wanted to stay, and that's why we made the call to put the other 18 that we got into the claims processing.
So all those frequently asked questions, are they kind of aggregated so that when you train the next group, you can train them with some of these answers that are kind of like the usual questions?
Yeah, so we did go through that, as well as the training manual that Carol put together for us. Taniguchi put together for us. So I do appreciate that again. So, this is, and I think for myself, there are areas that I can improve on. Sorry. For one thing, like the convention center, right? I'm trying to make sure the logistics are there, and so I didn't include Riker in the conversation. And I apologize for that. I should have talked to him sooner and whatnot, and I didn't realize it until yesterday. And it's like, oh shoots, I should have told him, because that's what we were working on, right? But again, there's capacity limitations that we have. You can imagine trying to get all these things up and running, but that's on me. That was my bad.
I think you're doing the best you can.
Yes.
Can you go back to your first page?
Sure.
Your new.
Our homepage.
Yeah, so that's a new homepage.
No, this is the standard homepage that we've had. We've just put these elements in.
No, but I'm sorry, just let me interject. So remember, I told you that my daughter-in-law got furloughed and she couldn't get in for a week.
Yes.
So one morning I helped her,
Right.
and that's not the page that we saw.
Yeah. So what she did was this is our DLIR homepage, but she, in all probability, went here to filing a UI claim.
Right, and that
What
looks a
she
little bit
probably
different too.
did was click here, which is our portal, right? And then this is where she had challenges getting into, and the reason why is this directly hits our mainframe. This is the direct.
But this
path
is
to
the information that they were given. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and that was
Yeah.
correct, because at that time, we did not have this form up yet, right? Until it was the 22nd of March. So if she later filed using this form, right? This form, actually, the information gets saved on another server, and then we ingest it or we upload it into the mainframe. But what this, along with the inquiry portal, allows us to do is control the traffic going into the mainframe. Because part of it too is that, this is part of a bigger state function, right? Because if we bring down the mainframe, because of the large number of traffic that we're getting, then Pankaj folks in DHS go down, because the welfare system is on this. DAG starts going down. And so there are these other critical systems that are on the mainframe that we're sensitive to, and realize that we can't, take all the resources, although we probably take in more of Doug's time than anyone else. And, they of course have been very supportive, but we're cognizant that the mainframe provides multiple processing systems, not just the unemployment insurance system.
So can you go back again to the main first page then? So, the second one, the unemployment claims online,
Yes.
where are those who have already filed, trying to do their weekly or bi-weekly check-in?
Okay, so those people would go to the claim, what is that? The claimant services. And they would log in, and then through this portal, they would then file their weekly certification.
But it's all the same system.
That's right. And so the trick for us was to get people off of this site, right? Because the site was what was getting bombarded, and when people log on to here, this is where the frustration comes in, because this is where they need to file their weekly certs and where they needed to file their initial filings. So the initial filings, and this is where they come on to actually check their claims as well. So everything runs through this portal, which is why creating the web form alleviated the initial claimants off of that site by creating this form, right? So the initial claimants now have this mechanism to go through. And then the people who are having inquiries and are curious about what the status is will be able to come through this portal.
Okay,
All
but
of
where are they going to do their weekly and bi-weekly says? Can you go back?
Sure, absolutely. So they'll go again through the claimant services, and that's again the same place.
Okay, so where is that information that tells them that's where they go to? Because a lot of them who are filing are looking for that form, and they're going to claimant services
Maybe you need a subtitle.
initially.
we can
The steps you had in the
yeah.
beginning.
It does have under the not frequently asked questions.
You had the step 1, step
Yeah.
2.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I think just reiterating with some kind of
Yeah.
additional
And,
language might
you know,
help.
so part of this, so it's actually down here, it actually explains to them.
Okay, that's what I'm
Right,
looking
but
for.
Literally step by step.
Right, but I think what
But
you're
that's
getting
not
at-
on the front page.
This is on the front page as well.
I didn't see it. Can you go back
Yeah,
again?
it
Sorry.
just got on,
Yeah, you know what? The reason I ask all these questions
no, it's fine, yeah.
is, you know, I used to be an administrator at MedQuest,
Oh, okay.
and I
yeah.
had the call centers under
Yeah.
me.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why I know that, I told you from the beginning where the problems were probably
Sure.
at.
And that's why we wanted to come today.
Yeah,
to
and
show
so
you-
I'm really
Right.
trying to make sure that the
Right.
system's still not being bogged, so,
So this is where
So-
that demonstration was. I think the question that
Okay,
you were
sorry,
asking
can't-
was,
It says how to file, certify and obtain unemployment benefits.
so
Okay,
this
but-
is the step-by-step guide.
that's still all the same. File, certify, that's all one click. They're
Right.
still going to the same place there.
This is the how-to book, though. It explains the
It's
step-by-step.
instructional.
Yeah, but I think those who have already filed their claim, and they're, I think, wanting to see on that right there, that list.
Yeah.
Yeah. On this list?
Yeah, on there,
Yeah.
it
So
should
we
have,
can-
okay,
right there,
check
check
your
your-
UI claim.
yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what they need to be doing,
Right.
going. Okay,
So-
so when you click that, check your UI claim.
This doesn't take them to the certification, though. This takes them to the site where they can check on the status of their claim. So if I'm hearing you right, I think what you're saying is we should better identify where somebody goes to file their.
There are weekly and
certification.
bi-weekly.
And
And
so this is a good example of what I mean by like, you know, how do we, like somewhere here, perhaps we could notify them about this is where you come to file your weekly claim or something of that
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
It is on that frequently asked, the
But you can't just be
step by
redundant.
step, but yeah, we
Yeah.
could,
You could put it on your front page, the front page.
Well, you can do it both.
well, let me just finish up with this thought then. So, I think I asked you the last time you were here if it was still a federal requirement for claimants to file their weekly and bi-weekly right now. I thought Rona Suzuki told us that it was not. Have you guys actually gone to the feds and asked whether that could be waived for 30 days, 60 days?
so what I've been told by USDO is no, we cannot waive that. So I can try and check, maybe there's a higher authority we can check.
Well, there should be something online that you guys are getting weekly from them, because I think this is where a lot of the hang-up is.
Part of the challenge for us is, again, UI is a balancing act. And we're concerned about what's going to happen on the back end. So even for things like, you know, what is that program, the small business loan program, they call it something? PPP, right. So under PPP, if somebody retroactive, if an employee has filed and qualified for benefits because they were unemployed, and then the employer later goes back and files PPP, and then makes a payment to the individual, that's considered an overpayment. And we would catch it through the weekly certification, right? That individual now has to go back and pay, and then we have to go back and collect.
Yeah, I know, but the SBA hasn't done any payments yet, so.
I'm just using that as an
Yeah, no, I
example as to why
understand,
we need this
but to
certification.
get through this whole 200,000 people that are trying to get onto file, what you guys are doing up front is making it harder for them to claim, because there are no payments being made yet. Once you guys know those payments are being made, I can see where you then kick in that. But I'm just saying, I know you guys have to go by federal regulations, but there should be some maybe lightening of the requirements because of the numbers that are trying to get in.
We have lightened, so I'm careful about how I say this, because there are concerns from the business community as well that we're being too lax on how we pay. Because we do have a fiduciary responsibility to trust as well as to the community, and we're trying to balance the two of those things. So the reason why we're speed testing some of the changes that I shared with you last time is that from the first time we saw system degradation, we removed a lot of the calls and activities that are internally within the system that allowed us that we were allowed to strip out. So we took them out based off of what we were allowed to do. And so as things became more or if things become more flexible, we certainly would implement those things. I mean, I think that's, our record goes to show that
So,
we
but
would
when
do
did
those
you
kinds of
implement
things.
this? When was this new system started?
Which news?
No, this whole new website.
This new
Also,
site?
So this claim check process was launched at 10 a.m. this morning.
Okay, so it's brand new.
It's brand new.
Okay.
I can tell you that the emails went up yesterday that are
Okay.
on this page, and then the presentations we wiped
Yeah.
over the weekend.
So maybe what we should do is give it some time and then have you come back again. I did want to ask one question,
Sure.
and this was some of the businesses that they're asking, can the experience modification ratings be frozen from the point of time that the COVID-19 emergency took place? And this is, I mean, the proclamation was made.
Right.
And this is what they're kind of concerned about. Yeah.
So everyone has to be experience rated, but they're not being charged for the COVID-19 situation. The charge code that we apply is different. The one that I'm worried about for the employers, where it's going to really hit them, is the fund's going to drain. We know that already. My last estimate, I think, was May 18th or something, depending on what is that? Whether or not you use the maximum benefit or the average weekly benefit. It was, I believe, May 18th. I got to go double check. But the one that I'm working on, suggesting it'll drain sooner, because we did the things that we had shared with you last time to accelerate the payment, and we anticipate it now coming out in a shorter period of time. And again, we are seeing the money flow. So last week, when I compared the forecast of what we did on the burn rate on the trust fund to what we actually paid last week, the burn rate estimate was about 10 point some million, and we paid 11.4. So we know that things are accelerating. So, you know, we know that the bottom line is that the trust is going to get drained. We know that we are, in all probability, going to have to borrow money based off of the federal government's interest-free loan. What worries me about that is that once this is over, the schedule rating or the schedule level that the employers are going to have to pay are much more. So I think one of the things that came out of the House committee meeting on economic recovery was to freeze the UI rates for a year, which may not be a bad idea, but I'm not sure from the economic recovery side, but I don't know how much we then, what we would have in the coffers to protect employee against a relapse of COVID-19 or something.
But isn't the funds that we're getting from the feds to protect some of our unemployment funds?
No, ma'am, it's not. It's to pay the additional $600 plus up. It's going to cover the PUA, the pandemic unemployment assistance that covers the 1099 self-employed, and it will pay for the 13-week benefit period. But the normal.
But it's also paying those SBA small business loans,
Yes.
giving them funds to pay their employees, which would then lessen the impact on what we're paying out.
Right. That's correct. That's correct.
So have you guys done any kind of charge, like what Hawaii is expecting from those SBA payments, how it's going to impact your UI payments?
No, I have not. I've only heard like some of the updates that came through the television, through the news.
Do you know if there's any issues with implementing the new federal UI benefits for independent contractors or the gig economy workers?
So I do think that where we could get some hang up is just making sure that data is available. Yeah? Because what happens is a claimant's data will have to be compared to either 1099 data or the self-reported data. I do know that when we file our state income tax returns, we file it based off of our federal AGI. So I don't know what that captures for self-employed individuals. That's the discussion that we're having with the tax office. So that, you know, and again, this isn't on the tax office, it's just on the availability of information. So if the information is not available, then what we would have to do is have them do some type of maybe send us your profit and loss statement so we can determine your benefit from it. Things of that nature would definitely slow down the process for determining benefit for the individual, which is why with all of these things, we're trying to automate it as quickly as possible. I believe the verification for pool is on their net income, not necessarily their GET, so hitting it up against GET wouldn't really make sense, at least at this point. So those are some of the challenges that we're anticipating with specifically related to pool. And again, we have started the discussion with tax. They are supportive of us. They understand our need, but if they themselves don't have access to the information, then
Just a follow-up on the gig workers, independent contractors, is that going to be reimbursed by the feds because that's not in the normal?
my understanding is yes. Yeah.
Okay, we have the Director of Health who's only going to have 20 minutes. So I know other people have questions.
I'm done, yeah.
So Senator Kim.
The $600, you said you're going to roll it out by April 27?
No, excuse me. We're trying to implement the solution for the $600 plus up by 4/17, which is this Friday.
Okay.
The money would then appear on 4th. Let me just double check because this is the money then for qualifying individuals and the ones that we process the claims for would show up on April 22nd, which is
22nd.
Wednesday of next week.
So that's when they should start getting their checks?
That's right.
Okay,
Right.
and how long before everybody gets it, do you know?
No, that's a question that's hard to answer because we have such a big backlog on the claims, right? So it's only the people who filed a clean claim were processed, were part of the group that are receiving, like, for example, the 11 million that came out last week, the 7 million that came out today. That's why the more we can process, right, the more they can
Do
benefit.
they get two separate checks? They get their regular state UI and then the 600?
What
Or
happens is it
one check?
pops up in their ACH automatically, but I'm not sure if it'll be one direct deposit or show two, but we're encouraging everyone to do direct deposit because we have a limited supply of checks.
Okay, so they're gonna say, thank you.
So can you give that time again? If the ones that are getting payments
Right.
recently, they filed when?
Well, if they're in that group that received payment, if they've received payment and they've been processed, but I can't say when they filed. That's the part that we have a hard time. We don't have the data.
Okay, so
Unfortunately, our system doesn't report
Yeah.
data. I lose the ability to aggregate cohort data. Yeah. That's the problem with one of the challenges we had with the existing devices.
Yeah, because that's part of the big questions we get back.
That is,
I
right.
filed on
Right.
April 1st
And so
and to date haven't
Right.
received
Yeah,
anything.
and
When
so-
when will I get something?
Right,
So-
and that shows you like just how challenging it is because every
Yeah.
individual person calling us going, hey, can you help us find out what's the status of my claim, which is why we believe that this online UI claims check will help quite a bit and it'll allow us to focus our time on
Okay.
other things.
Got it.
Just to clarify, on the certification, so people don't have to be looking for a job, if they're on the jobs. They just have to just file and say the weekly, whatever it is, on that
Yes,
certification.
they get asked two specific questions on it. The first one is, are you able and available to work? And they need to say yes to that. The second question they get asked is, have you looked for 3 jobs? And they should just say yes. Even we know you didn't, just say yes. Because
Just
we
to get
waive
you
that statutorily. But for me to dig that out of the code creates these back-end problems. So I'd ask the public to help us and just say yes. I would tell you if you say no. It's going to send you this message that says you should be looking for 3 jobs, but what we are doing is manually overriding that as opposed to removing it so that we don't cause the back-end problems, but we don't delay the recipient's payment.
And is that in your instruction, somewhere in your instruction of certification?
And we tweeted that too.
So, yeah, I
Okay,
think it is, yeah.
good, thank you,
Okay, any last questions?
thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I thought you wanted the numbers again? Who wanted the numbers? Of what you... New claims versus regular claims?
Sure, I'd be happy to provide that.
We can email it.
How long do you anticipate you're going to need these additional workers?
So, yeah, it depends on, how if we have like rotating shifts and whatnot. But I guess the best way to put it is this. So the total claims that we've seen now total filings that we've received are 253,262. Of that, 22,631 were replications. So they filed both in the portal and both on the form. That leaves us a net out of 230,631. That's the total amount of unique filings that we have. But that number has been decreasing. We've started to see a decline in the number of new filings starting from Saturday of the 4th of April. So we do know that it's on a decline, but it's still higher than what we've seen in previous, prior to in February. So I'm kind of, my suspicion is that I'm hoping the claims start falling off significantly, the initial filings start falling off significantly, which then tells me this is the tranche of people that you have to deal with, right? The one big cohort. From there I've applied the 21 days and try to track it, but I can't track them uniquely from one week to another.
Just so that we know as far as how manpower, how long you're going to need them for.
I appreciate that, and please know that we are, again, I wish I had more time to follow up with Riker and do things, but we are looking at doing multiple shifts, the viability of that, how I can get the right people, because I have to be sure that the right people can consult with them and answer their questions are available from our staff as well.
Thank you.
The question for the
Sure.
manpower, he said that he's waiting for you to give him the exact numbers that you need. That's what he said the other day, and that's the question that I had, that he's waiting upon you to request from him how much manpower you're going to actually need, so he can start deploying them to your department.
So my understanding was they told us they had 20 ready for us this week and the subsequent week. I think for the short term, the discussion was this is what we have, can you take it, right? And I think that discussion is going to get better as we go along. I think, again, when it comes to things like the convention center, we can now start talking about, okay, right, we're going to rotate the shift, what will that look like, right? And or more so, Riker could tell me, okay, Scott, we're going to rotate that shift, what does that look like? And I can tell them, well, I have these maybe 9 UI guys that can split into 3 shifts of 3 people each, right? So that's kind of the complexity of that discussion.
But he knew you needed 57 people.
57 was what we had put on the form of request. And again, I got you guys form, but I just gave you what we had because otherwise I'm trying.
I think you gotta ask him ideally what you need. And what, instead of him saying, oh, I got 20, you would take 20. It's like, no, I need 50 to be ready because we're going to need them in increments of 3 days and shifts and stuff. So, for him to just say, well, I have 20 ready, I mean, you need to give him the larger number so they can start getting them ready.
And he also needs to understand, the feds are paying for it rather than it coming out of our general budget. That really makes a big difference for us.
Well, and the fact we have these people that are getting paid and are not, doing normal work, so.
But the unemployment benefit is the unemployment check they get plus the $600, right?
That's correct. Starting next week. And barring any other problems, because it is still in test, but our target is Friday.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter how much they've been earning, they don't get the full $600.
The 600 plus up, my understanding is yes. But the amount we pay, that's a benefit that we determine based on their prior experience and those sorts of things, right?
The UI
Right, so I want to suggest to them that, you can expect a maximum benefit across everything. The Hawaii benefit that's calculated is something we calculate. The $600
is an additional benefit.
Additional benefit, yes.
Just going back to the staffing, can you actually get 50 people and then have your people start training them so they're in the wing? So as you're set up at either the libraries or the convention center, you have people that can just go in right away.
So we
you ask
could,
them for
but
all
the
of
problem
them.
is that, again, the training isn't really a difficult part. It's like gaining a proficiency that's hard. So they got to actually be doing it, right? And then as they're doing it, they come to us and they go, hey Bill, how do I do this, right? Or, hey Scott, how do I do this? That interaction lets them gain capabilities.
Yeah, but it's just the longer we wait to start, the longer it's going to take. When we could have had this at least
At least
some
having
people.
the people that you know where to assign them.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for all your hard work and all your people's hard work.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
You also might consider wanting to do a video online so they can see all this.
Working on.
Thank you.
Or they can play
Because I'm a
this.
visual person, I think that will help. Okay, sanitize.
You have reports or you're just looking at?
No, yeah,
Gotta
he's
go
gonna- we
again.
have, we told them to call after health,
Okay.
because if not, this is gonna be waiting for everybody. Yeah.
The questions getting better and better. So we should be all 15 minutes, because if they're shorter, we can go eat lunch. Take a break.
I know, I have my lunch in my bag.
Wow. I had lala for breakfast, so I'm okay until
Are we
another.
for-
Okay, so we're just waiting to sanitize the
Too busy watching CNN.
table and the mic.
Yeah, answering emails too. My staff getting irritated.
That what?
Answering emails at 11 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you got to tell the people watching the changes.
Okay, so we're going to hear from the Department of Health next, and Department of Transportation is going to get moved to the final speaker. So thank you, Dr. Anderson, for making the time.
We already passed.
Do you have any updates you want to provide the committee first?
Sure, let me give you a quick update on what's happening today. We got reports of 13 new positive test results for Hawaii, but that number includes 4 Hawaii residents who were diagnosed outside the state. Typically, the CDC requires that we report individuals who were residents of Hawaii, even if they got sick on the mainland. In this case, they got sick on the mainland, and they're being isolated there, but they're counted as Hawaii cases. So our actual new case count is 9 today, which is, of course, good news, at least it is for me. Yesterday we had 5 cases, so we're seeing a drop in the number of reported cases right now. Doesn't mean it's going to stay that way, but obviously it's better to see that than the other.
Are we
Things
seeing
go
a
the other
drop
way.
in the hospitalized cases too?
What's that?
Are we seeing a drop in those needing hospital care?
Yeah, actually one of the 9, I believe, today was hospitalized when we heard about the case. Yes, that's correct. One here on Oahu was hospitalized. We actually are seeing about the same proportion as hospitalized cases as many of the other states are, but we're seeing much fewer cases than most other states, so fewer hospitalizations. As far as I know, I don't know when last time you heard from the Healthcare Association, but we haven't seen the surge here that has stressed out the hospitals or medical facilities, as was the case in New York and other places. So that's all good news.
So the 9 cases, are they from how many tests? So are we increasing our tests and getting less positives, or is the number of tests being done on a status quo, or what's the status? Because just to say we've got 9 less, we don't know if those are old cases that they were pending the reports. How do we judge that?
Every day we get new case reports, and we get them
Right, but based
immediately.
on-
So these are tests that are done on patients typically within the last few days, but sometimes we may even have a longer delay, as you're suggesting. The date of onset of the illness may have been actually as long as 2 weeks before that. But we get the results and report them immediately when we get them from the laboratories that these cases are positive. To get to your first question, on the number of cases, we're actually over 19,000 cases now in Hawaii. We're one of the states that has probably the most tests per capita of any state in the country. And we are increasing the number of tests that are being done rapidly. Private labs are doing the vast majority of these tests. The 3 laboratories that are doing that here in the state. Some of those tests are still going, some of those samples are still going to the mainland for testing, so that explains the long turnaround. And then, of course, we get the results back when they're finished. We have a testing program here, but our capacity is very limited. and we can do a test and turn around in less than a day, so there's no significant delay. The private labs in town are looking to build the capacity to be able to test all the samples here. But these drive-through testing programs that have been implemented result in hundreds of tests, and that essentially overwhelms the laboratory capacity here, so that they have to then send their samples to the mainland. So that's part of the issue with testing. We have a limited capacity here to do the testing locally. We're hoping we can get that up to the point where there's no need to send samples to the mainland anymore. One last thing on that, Senators, we prioritize tests for outbreak purposes. So, for example, at Maui Memorial or in any of these outbreaks where we have clusters, those are all given priority, and they typically are turned around in a day or so. So there's no delay. It's these drive-through testing programs that result in sometimes significant delays in getting the results.
So
Those are not considered a priority for us.
speaking of capacity, I think the last time we spoke, we talked about the possibility of, well, the JABSM, wanting to start their lab, but have not had any help. Has DOH reached out to them to help them so they can get up and running?
I know our lab director has been in touch with Jepson about starting out, and we certainly are there to help. But they like any other commercial lab, would need to develop the capacity and be certified to do that. So I don't know exactly where they are on that. They're of course probably focused more on research-related activities, which are important too. And there are lots of new tests being developed now.
I thought they already had their certification.
I think they may have their CLIA certification.
Yes.
Yes, I think you're right. That's required for any laboratory to do the tests. It basically sort of like good housekeeping seal of approval, making sure they have all the equipment and facilities in place that assure that safety hoods and things that would be necessary to do tests on biologic specimens like this.
And one of the statements that DOH keeps making is that the concern is that we don't have enough test kits. Are you guys getting your supply the same place where Dr. Miskovich gets his? Is there a competition there?
I don't know where he goes to get his. Our lab, our state lab, has capacity to do 60 to a couple hundred tests per day, and we have reagents and other things necessary to do what's necessary to cover our needs. The clinical labs order their own supplies from probably mainland suppliers, and as I understand it, it's not a question of reagents or other supplies available. They simply don't have the capacity, from the standpoint of personnel and others, to do the testing locally, and that's why they're sending the results to the mainland, the samples to the mainland for testing. So hopefully they'll get to a point where they can keep up with the volume. I think you're going to need to ask them what the issues are, but for us at least, we have limited test kits that are available to all the states to do testing, but as a reference laboratory for what we do, we haven't had any problem. And we've been able to keep up with the demand for testing samples that are associated with an outbreak or, for example, at Maui Memorial or other situations. When someone's symptomatic and needs to be tested, we can do those tests at our lab. That hasn't been a constraint so far.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish up. So on TV last night, the doctor made a public statement that the state is trying to shut him down. What gives him that impression, or?
No idea. This is his thing. He's basically going out to the communities and testing people as he feels is appropriate.
Is there any requirement that the state, you're head of DOH, so is there any requirement that people, whether it's Dr. Miskovich or any of the other labs, are doing the tests, that certain procedures are followed and certain statements are made, for instance, that they have to be quarantined for 14 days or until they receive the test results?
Our policies are very clear, and most physicians are following those, that if you're tested and you're part of an investigation, and it's determined that you're at high risk, we call them close contacts, you are to be quarantined, even if you don't have symptoms, until the test results come back. And of course, if they come back and you're positive, you're isolated for 14 days. That's a clear and very
You
strict
guys
policy.
are doing that,
I mean,
but are all the testers, all the labs testing, are they making sure that this message gets out to people being tested?
honestly, I'm not sure what Miskovich is telling people.
Not just him, all the labs do.
Honestly, every physician in the state can have a test done if they want it on a COVID patient. They can write a script for a test and it can be done. And there are clear guidelines on what should be done. We recommend, of course, we support testing symptomatic individuals, and there are criteria or protocols that would be followed by those individuals. And these drive-through screenings, this is not something that's sanctioned by the state generally. And remember that they're not doing the tests. They're collecting samples, and they send it to commercial labs that are doing the tests. These are the same labs that are supporting the hospitals and everyone else who needs the diagnostic procedures, including all the other physicians in the state. So, but there are very clear general guidelines for physicians and others who have positive cases. They obviously have to report to us. We will follow up on every positive case. Doesn't matter who takes the sample, and we have done that, and we'll continue to do that. And we follow up on their contacts and so forth. We now have over 500 cases, and we followed up on every one of those and all the contacts.
So are there no...
How much are the tests? How much are the tests? We've done 19,000. How much? Who's paying? And how much are they?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't charge for our tests at our state lab. We get test kits. We do the analysis in support of the state health department, and there's no immediate charge to the patient or anyone else for that. I don't know how the Dr. Miskovich or others are paying for their services. Presumably they're billing the healthcare provider for those.
I think so. I wanted to know, is there a protocol that the labs are following as to whose swabs get tested first? If it's from Maui Hospital or somebody that Miskovich was doing on the...
We certainly have agreements with all the private labs that emergency care personnel, EMS workers, police department, other public safety officers all have priority, and all they need to do when a physician gets a sample is note on the submission for testing that they are an emergency worker, and they will give them priority. I think that's generally accepted and it's being honored by all the private labs.
That was my concern. Thank you.
Yeah, and that happens, and that's important because we don't want to have those samples thrown into the batch that goes to the mainland, and have to wait a week or so to get the results.
So there's 19,000 included.
Dr. Anderson, my question is, the tests, the actual tests that you're saying that you have a limited supply, is it attained by you folks, or how does all the test kits come into the state?
It's actually pretty much the same test. It's a PCR test that detects the virus in a person's circulation.
I just want to know how they come in. I don't necessarily want to know about the test.
Okay, well, they don't. We receive test kits,
Right. Where do
which
you
are
get
basically
them?
all the reagents and everything else we need to test individuals. That comes to us from the Centers for Disease Control, goes to our state laboratory, and that's what we use to run the test. We actually have the instruments that are needed to run the test.
Okay, so we don't buy it ourselves. We don't go off to a different country or ask, because I'm having people telling me that we can get these kits from Korea, that's EU approved, FDA approved. Washington State's already ordered from them, and they want to know if we need kits. So I'm just trying to understand, where do we get the kits? So they need to go talk to the Center of Disease Control if they have that source?
I would, of course, the people who are testing, doing most testing now are private laboratories.
So where are they getting their kits from?
They are ordering them presumably through their own suppliers.
I think that's what they're concerned
And ordering the reagents and everything else.
There's no state
There's
control.
no state control over that. The test itself is certified. The test they use is approved by FDA under an emergency exemption to test symptomatic individuals. They then are able to do the test, and as long as they can get the reagents and testing materials, they can test as many as they want.
So the
We certify those laboratories, though, but we don't provide the materials for them. They are obtaining their own materials from whoever the sources are.
So the question is, if in fact there is a source that we can get these test kits, who would be the individual that we should connect them to?
Connect them to the private laboratories. There too, I can mention on Kaiser. But let me just say frankly, there's a lot of fly-by-night companies out there.
Right.
I get a dozen of those offers every day.
I understand.
Right, and a lot of them are unapproved tests. Many of them have never been demonstrated to be specific or
if
sensitive.
they're certified and they're FDA approved and Washington State have already have orders pending, then I'm just saying if we're so short of kits and we're not testing because of that, and there is a pipeline for these approved tests, wouldn't we want to at least look into it? And who would be the one to look into it? And that's the question.
What I'm saying is we're not short for doing the work that we do at the health department. There's contact tracing and all the other things that we do when we have outbreaks. We haven't run into that issue or that problem. There are lots of new tests coming out. There's
Okay,
a lot
I
of
just need to
information.
know who would be the individual who would oversee this that we could contact.
Clinical
That's all I
Laboratories of
wanna know.
Hawaii.
I'm sorry? Laboratories
Clinical
of
Laboratories of
clinical.
would be one. Kaiser is also apparently doing some testing here.
Okay, so they'd have to.
Yeah, I would, but believe me, they're getting the same offers that you're getting from all these companies. Again, the capacity here is largely limited by the number of employees they have and physical limits on how many they can actually handle in a particular
No, but we
day.
keep hearing we don't want to test because we don't have enough kits. We keep saying
No, it's not.
that.
It's actually, that's not
That's
true.
what
That's
you've
not.
told us.
No, it's not. When you take a sample, you have to have personal protective equipment.
Understand.
Okay, that's what's limited. The masks, the gloves, the gowns. Every time you take one of these tests, you have to put one of those on. The
Okay.
test kits themselves are not a major problem. We had a problem temporarily with the swabs, the very specific swabs, and then we had some problems with the
Thank you for clarifying that,
reagents.
because we were told, and this committee, I don't know if you could agree with me or not, that we had limited test kits, and we were saving it, right? Because we didn't want to use it all. That's what we were told. So now, and we were told that you needed the gloves and you needed that, but it was the test kits. So, and then we only had 5 of the 3 hour ones. You can do only 5 at a time.
Okay, that's another issue.
So I'm just saying, we were told that we had a limited amount of kits.
We did get some
so-
rapid test kits produced by Abbott Laboratories that just came in. We're just distributing the equipment to the neighbor islands. We got 5 test kits with the 15 pieces of equipment. Those 5 test kits will only enable us to test 120 people total for a week.
Right.
That's
So
what I
these
think
are
I
the
mentioned.
rapid
That's what I think I
kits.
mentioned to you. That's a new test. It's a rapid test that's just being rolled out for diagnostic purposes. That's not what we're using for our case follow-ups, and it's not being used by Miskovich or anyone else. Those are brand new test kits.
Understand, and those are the kits that they're talking about, so I'm just saying.
Those are very limited, and you're right. That is a constraint on, we simply don't have enough of those particular test kits.
So we just want to make sure to put the right people together.
Before this new technology came out, when we were going downstairs to take the test, that's what they was telling us. That if you don't have any symptoms, you wasn't in contact to Senator Nishihara, we're not giving you the test because we're limited on the testing. That was told to us. Not the gloves, not the protection. the kids. That's what they told us, okay? So going fast forward to that, took them 16 days before I got a call back to let me know that I was negative, okay?
Yeah.
Now, the ones you're talking about that doing all of these outside, they're charging their insurance company for the ones that you're talking about on outside the drive-through. If they're gonna test you, they take your insurance card and your insurance, like how you did downstairs, like they did to us. So that's who's probably paying for it. But what I'm saying is that you're in the Department of Health. Who is regulating these outside? Who is regulating them? So now they're already making 100 guys they're gonna test today, right? Who's gonna regulate them if they really actually needed to have the testing done? There's no overseas. What Senator Donald was saying is that you are the Department of Health. I know they can get from different vendors, but you're the state. You're the state. So if they overwhelming our testing labs, can you tell the governor, or you cannot tell them, hey, I understand you guys only make money vendors, but you know what? We're in a crisis here on testing. So now we're at that point. Can you step in and
Well, I'll tell you, Senator, the health department doesn't have that authority, but it's possible the governor might have under the emergency exemptions. You're raising some good points, and I obviously, when the senators were tested after we had we were not doing that testing, of course. That was not a health department sanctioned event. We did follow up on all the contacts, the staff, and others who we felt were close contacts. But that testing process that you experienced was done by a private laboratory, a physician and laboratory. And unfortunately, there were some long delays in getting the results back. And that's because they were sent to the mainland. And back then, there was actually more limited testing capacity than there is today. Now those laboratories, some of them anyway, can do the tests locally. That wasn't the case when you were tested, and others perhaps.
Ours went locally because they got theirs in 3 days. I got mine in 5.
Yeah.
We were 2 weeks.
Mine was
3 of us were 2
But we all took it the same day.
I honestly
You
don't know.
guys were DLS, we were clinical labs.
The two labs, by the way, are DLS and Clinical Laboratories of Hawai'i and Kaiser. There are only 3 players in the testing community here. Those are it. And don't forget the health department does confirmation testing. If they can't get a result that's dependable or an uncertain result, we'll retest and we'll figure out whether it's positive or negative. But most of the testing now is being done by one of those 3 labs. The vast majority of the 19,000 tests that are been done today in the state are done by those.
Senator Kiho Kalole.
Thank you, Dr. Emerson, for coming back. Yet again, I have 2 specific scenarios that I want to bring to your attention to follow up on this discussion. One is that I have nursing homes in my district who will not take new incoming patients unless they have proof of a negative test result, regardless of their symptomatic status. So if the Department of Health doesn't have oversight over that, can you please direct us to who would? And the second is, I have constituents in essential industries, one constituent in particular, whose workplace was shut down because a coworker tested positive. And they were informed by their employer that they were not to return to work until they had a doctor's note that showed that they had tested negative. This individual went to his primary care physician and was told he did not need a test because he was asymptomatic. Thereafter, went to one of the drive-through tests, got a test, and got a letter from the drive-through that said, if you test negative, you can take this to your employer and go back to work. So you folks aren't in charge of regulating that. I think there needs to be somebody engaging in a discussion about getting some clarity on this situation, because you have repeatedly come before this body and we have had to repeatedly make it clear to our constituents that current testing can verify a positive with a degree of veracity, but not a negative, because it depends on your, I think you said feral load. I'm not a doctor, and so it makes it very difficult to engage in these discussions and mitigate some of these conflicts in the absence of somebody overseeing these issues.
Let me just quickly respond. First of all, you have it right. I mean, that's essentially the problem with these tests is they're point-in-time tests. At the time you take the test, we can say whether you have the virus circulating in your system in large amounts. Typically, you're symptomatic, you'd expect that to be the case. We can't tell if you've been recently exposed and may have the virus, and you just simply haven't developed enough virus to test. And of course, it doesn't protect you against getting infected the next day or whenever you might be. So it's a very limited test. It's intended for diagnostic purposes only. When you're in a hospital and you have symptoms and you want to know whether that person has COVID-19 or not. That's what it's designed for. Otherwise, it's practically useless. We're not advocating this to the healthcare industry as a requirement to go back to work for those reasons. I don't know why the long-term care facility you mentioned is requiring that. That's not something we're saying. They can always impose additional requirements if they choose to. We do have very specific infection control guidelines for long-term care facilities. In fact, we just did some ground rounds on this to be sure that everyone's up to speed on what they really should do. And obviously checking on the health of visitors. Some have actually stopped allowing visitation. But lots of other requirements are imposed. But requiring a person be tested is not necessarily one of those. I'll just say one more thing on that. On this outbreak on Maui Memorial case, we have 2 long-term care facilities which have been studied carefully because of that. One had patients from the hospital transferred to long-term care facility. There were 6 of those patients. We did test them, and they were all negative. And the reason we did that is we sort of in an abundance of caution, we felt we should do that because they were associated with a known outbreak of illness. So we felt that even though the test is limited in terms of its ability to tell us whether the person was infected or not, it was worth doing. And we've done that in other situations where we've had outbreaks and we're looking at close contacts. So we have used the test for asymptomatic individuals, but it's only in those situations that we've done that. And I don't know anyone who's doing that as a requirement of everyday activities. But I thought I'd just mention that there are rare circumstances where we would recommend testing asymptomatic individuals, and those are the situations that I just mentioned.
Well, Director, I understand that, and I understand that the situation has changed over time. Since, if this individual, if construction worker was the individual, the primary care physician said he did not need a test, but he went to the drive-thru because he needs a test to go back to work. Who's paying for the test? Is the insurance going to come? I mean, I think there's a need for some transparency and guidelines on that. What if he took the test asymptomatic but was incubating and then came up positive later and gets better? I mean, these are issues that are more and more going to take the forefront if we are in fact flattening the curve, right?
Right, you're right on, and there is a risk of testing someone who's found to be negative, and that person then has a false sense of security and goes out and even he or she is carrying the virus. They think they are not, and they may be disregarding some of the other precautions that are mentioned. You raise a really good question. I think we need to develop clear policies because people all over are requiring different things.
Yeah.
So I hear you, and we will work on trying to get some clear guidance.
I think also that you can look at this as I don't want to say an invasion of employees' rights, but some employers may be just using this as an excuse to get rid of employees. I mean, that's hard, sad to say in this kind of time, but that could be happening. So without clear policies that Senator Keohokalole is asking for, basically all employees are, at risk for being let go because the employer feels that everybody needs to be tested when it's not true.
That's right. The easiest thing to remember is CDC and the health department are in lockstep on this. If you're symptomatic, you should be tested, okay? Regardless. It certainly, if an employer sees someone who's ill and they would want them to be tested. But we do have a clear policy statement. It's the same statement that CDC comes out on testing. And I urge that you take a look at that. I think it's on our website, and I know we recently provided it to our Joint Information Center to be sure that people who asked had a clear understanding of that. So if you wanted to, you could ask for a copy of that. It's general to everyone. It's not for employers, but it's perhaps helpful.
Thank you. Question. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. You know, in terms of your contact tracing and testing, that seems to be what everybody's looking at as flattening the curve so that you can actually look at how you contain. What is the status of your contact tracing and testing?
Yeah.
What are the numbers?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking the question, Brendan. We have lots of course, for every case, and we have over 500 now, we have investigated those cases and identified contacts, and we follow up on the contacts and make sure they're quarantined, and if they need to be tested, if they're symptomatic, they're all tested. But if they're not, they're quarantined for 14 days, and we've done that for virtually everyone. We've been able to handle the numbers so far. Last time I was here, I think someone asked, perhaps Senator Kim, about what we need going forward. And actually, I've been working with Dr. Park and others to come up with numbers of new employees we might need to do the contact tracing that we want. And we're looking at a significant number of increase of our employees. If we want to open up the state and we want to be sure that people are identified early on and they're tested, we're going to have to increase our capacity to do that considerably. She was talking about 30 to 50 new staff members, something
so
that
the
ballpark.
19,000 that's tested, is that part of the 500 contact traced individuals that you've tested, or is that a different pool?
Out of the 19,000, we have 500 cases. All the rest are negative. We don't follow up that the test is negative. It's probably the flu or perhaps someone who's asymptomatic and they're not sick at all. But the 500, and actually the exact number today is 517, including the 13 we had today. So we followed up on all 513, 17 of those. And again, that's out of 19,000 tests that have been done, and done all the contact tracing with those.
So none of the contact traced people from the 519 had tested positive?
No, if they were tested, that's not quite correct. If they were tested positive, they would be a case. So contacts can become cases. If we find someone, if I'm, for example, a contact and we're tested positive, I would be in a case. And then people will be, looking at contacts that I might have had, my wife and, whoever I was exposed to. And it goes down the line like that until they've really exhausted all the contacts for the cases that we know about. So one case can turn into many. I'll give you one example because you're going to hear about it in the news tonight. We had a McDonald's employee, I probably shouldn't say the name of the company, but that's what it is, it'll come out, who got sick. He inadvertently, I'm sure, infected 6 other employees. So there were 7 employees who were infected. And then this one individual lived in an extended household with lots of people in it, and 7 other people in the household became sick. So one person can really create a significant problem. And those are confirmed cases. Those aren't just contacts. Those are people who got sick, and they're all in isolation, all being restricted now in activities.
But you found that because of the contact testing.
Yes.
Yeah. See. So.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have one case.
That's what we try to do.
Right. Of course, we always look at your coworkers. They're the ones who are usually closest to you, and family members. And in this case, both coworkers and family members turned out to be, a number of them anyway, turned out to be positive. But that's what we're going to have to be doing going forward. You ask, so where are we going to be in a month? And I'd say, this disease is not going to go away. We're still going to get occasionally cases. It's not going to disappear. But the important thing is when we get a case, we're on it quickly, and we identify those contacts, and those contacts are isolated.
But
Do we know how many? And we do.
But that goes to adding 3 times the amount of staff, though, right? So that you can do that.
Right. Again, right now we're barely able to cope with what we have. We have 30 volunteers on top of our staff, and we're still barely able to keep up with.
So did the request go to DHERD asking for help?
We just submitted the request. I think you were asking about this last week, and we were in the process of putting that final request together. That would be for potentially new temporary or permanent positions. We can't rely on volunteers forever, of course. We got a really good cadre of, nurses and physicians, retired and others, working on this with us, which we really appreciate. But we're going to need to have, capacity to be able to do this going forward.
And as it expands, you have enough test kits. You're saying the test kits and the PPEs.
Yeah, that's not an issue though, right? Anymore.
No, that's not an issue.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what some of the other departments, they need labor, they need help with labor.
Yeah, this is basically called shoe leather epidemiology, where you're going out, you're checking where people are working, finding out who they're in contact with.
Do we know how many of the 19,000 cases were people that were tested more than once?
No, but I doubt if more than a handful were. We would eliminate duplicate testing.
No, I know, but you mean, like you said, I may be tested today and not be positive. I could be positive 3 days from now. So do we know how many people might have been tested more than once? And we don't.
I can only guess, because you might. It probably doesn't happen very often, and that's again a problem. It doesn't tell you anything about what's coming down the line. Those people who are tested negative, they could be infected the next day.
Right, and that's why I'm wondering.
Get back to where you started.
So the people that were tested positive, do we ask the data of whether or not they were tested earlier?
Well, we would, of course. Again, we're involved with just looking at the cases. On these drive-thrus, I honestly don't know what
No, but
questions
I'm
to
talking
ask.
about the ones that are positive. Are we getting data from them?
Oh, yeah, no, every one of the positives, all 500 that I mentioned, we get a detailed history on them.
So how many of them had taken a test prior and was not positive? We don't know.
None, zero.
None.
Again, we would only be notified about a case if they had
I understand.
symptoms and they were positive. I can't think of a single situation where there was a positive.
Not always hospitalized, right? Not always hospitalized.
Exactly. In fact, today only one was hospitalized. And people come and go from the hospital. But a small percentage of the cases are hospitalized. I think something in the order of 30 or 40 out of that 500 were actually in the hospital when we got the report. So most people are home, they have flu-like symptoms at home, or a doctor picks it up in their clinic.
Yeah, but the only part that we're not tracking on the news, we hear the gloom and the seriousness of this disease, but then we don't hear the ones going home that was on ventilators and was really sick, and they recovered, and the recovering effort of the hospitals and Kaiser, Queens doing a great job in helping these families recover, because it seems like we're only getting the negative stuff in the media of how serious this is. So who's keeping track of the ones that coming out of intensive care, coming off the ventilators? Who's keeping track of them after they recover in the hospital and going home?
Yeah, we track them at least through the point that they're out of isolation, but often will not track them much beyond that. So they're basically sick for a couple of weeks. If they're in the hospital, of course, it's longer, and then they're out, and we don't follow up on those. It's a really good question, and I think we should probably get better information out on who's recovered. We have 9 deaths so far, and you can figure that out of that 500, whatever number I gave you, 9 have died. Essentially, all the others are either have recovered or they're being cared for and certainly haven't died. So, the good news is that the death rate here is relatively low. It's about 1% or less, less than 1%. So.
But that doesn't mean that we can all run out on the street and start seeing each other, so.
No, and of course, we're lucky not to have nursing homes and other very sensitive populations infected. That's where you see the very high death rates. People in the nursing homes are older, often have underlying health conditions, and you really want to focus on keeping the disease out of those places. If I could say there are 2 things that we would be doing going forward. One is making sure the nursing homes are protected. The other, of course, is getting a capacity to do the case investigations. And the last thing is to do some surveillance. Be sure we're doing, hopefully there's an antibody test out there where we can go out and look to see where the virus is, not just depending on test results and people identifying cases, but actually checking to see how active the virus is in our community. But with those conditions in place, I think from a public health standpoint, we can start looking at opening things up.
Senator Kehoe Kalole.
Senator, I'm due upstairs for a press conference, and it's starting in less than 10 minutes.
Okay, if you can just quickly.
Okay, real quick, FEMA put out some guidance a couple days ago about community-based testing sites transition. Can you give us some clarity on that?
I'll have to check. Honestly, I know. I don't know what testing sites you're speaking to, but let me check on that, and I'll try to get back to you next time we talk. Okay?
It's called the community-based testing sites transition. Please, thank you.
We'll do. Thank you.
And if you can just follow up again on the staffing request, and then so we can help with DHERD, hopefully getting that to you.
By the way, the staffing request related to COVID-19 is paid, the salaries are paid by FEMA, so it helps our general fund not to pay out of the general fund.
Yeah, I
Just
think
so
almost
they can-
anything we can tie to this current outbreak,
Yeah.
potentially we can get reimbursed for. So we're using that as much as we can. I'm talking about permanence. When we start looking at where we're going to be in 6 months or whatever,
Correct.
we're going to need to have our own staff.
Well, I also think that we need to look at places like Hokkaido and all those that thought they were in the clear, and now the cases are coming back again, because we need to follow up. Are they are people getting reinfected, or are these people that are coming
you can
in?
build the staff that you want using the federal dollars now, and then later on we can transition it.
Good. Thank you for that. I think that's a great way to go. They're experienced then, they know what they're doing, and we'll know better at that point kind of what we need to.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I have to run, but thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have,
Coffee.
this is our last one for today. Airports Division. Ross, you're on. Ross. So this is a packet that came from airports. It's that handwritten.
I'm here.
Okay, you want to give us an update?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. The request that I'd like to update you from our last meet. We have implemented screening on all passengers effective April 1st. To be clear, this is for all crew members and passengers of commercial flights, including cargo carriers and private jet charters. The average screening team is 6, composed of form and temperature screeners. The team is based on flight and passenger information on scheduled flights. Utilizing the National Guard for temperature screening for both domestic and inter-island. We're utilizing the firefighters for international packs along with cargo and private charters. The sequencing of domestic arriving passengers starts with verification of government ID with the AG form and the new app. Completing the form called the order for self-quarantine, which initials are required for each order, signature by the passenger and screener. And lastly, the temperature check. The sequencing for inter-island passengers start with completing the inter-island declaration form, completing the order for self-quarantine if you don't have the exemption form, and lastly, temperature check performed for all departing passengers. Some statistics: over the last 4 days, an average of 700 passengers flew inter-island. Keep in mind, passengers may be counted twice as passengers commute and will fly from one island in the morning and return in the evening. The overwhelming majority of inter-island passengers are residents. Due to the downturn in packs, we have closed down concourse. At Honolulu, we completed shutdown of C gate known as Makai Pier and the C gate known as Ella Concourse. For the neighbor islands, half of the terminals have all been closed. I'd like to also add that and recognize and praise all of the airport managers and employees who have endured this unprecedented crisis so far. We started from ground zero, and we've implemented and adjusted procedures to discourage travel from an average of 32,000 passengers to less than 370 passengers per day. Custodians have worked tirelessly to provide additional sanitization at all of our airports, and many of them have not complained at all. So at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Senator Kim.
Hi, Ross. Thank you for joining us. Hi,
You're
Ross.
welcome.
Can you hear us? Okay, thank you. So for the quarantine form that I'm looking at, it doesn't have the place of residence, the address, or where they're staying. Is that on another form? Is that on the...
Sorry, going in and out, I missed the last part. You said about the form from General Hawai'i.
Yeah, the order for self-quarantine, you're just asking if you are a resident, your designated quarantine location is your resident. If you're a visitor, your designated quarantine is your hotel. But they don't state where it is, or do they supposed to state and put the address there?
That information is on either the ag form or on the app itself.
The travel app.
Okay, because the egg form only shows your home address, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you might be staying if you have people that are saying they're going to be intended residents, right? And there's no...
On the ag form, there's a line for the name of the hotel or lodging.
Right, but it doesn't state if they're coming in and they're intended to be a resident and they're staying at a private residence, somebody else's home that they're staying with family.
I would think that the home address would mean that if you fill out the form into the home address, that would be that you'd be a resident.
Okay, and is someone following up to make sure that, one, it's a legitimate address, and two, that they're in fact staying at that address?
From what I know, when the ag form is submitted, HTA collects the ag form, that they immediately call the hotel to see if that person is there, to make sure that, you know, if they have a reservation or not with the hotel.
Right, we know about the hotels, but we're looking at if they're staying at private residence or somewhere other than a hotel.
They check on every passenger that comes through, and they do a check up to 3 times during their visit.
So they check up on, because General Hara said they weren't following up on private residents, only hotels.
From what I know, that's what HTA said. I can verify that if it's been the residents. I know that they call for all the tourists that go to hotels.
Okay, can you follow up on that, please, and get back to us? Because that seems to be a point of contention on who is actually following up on these residents or intended residents, and if they're actually complying with the 14-day quarantine.
I'll get that answer for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senator Murwaki.
One of the things that's on the form says that they have to wear protective gear for the next 14 days. When they're coming off the plane, is somebody giving them a mask or anything to then transport themselves with the protective gear? Because I don't think they come with it.
No, we haven't been gifting that, not to my knowledge. I can check in with our team that the others did bring in PPEs, but that looks our first line of these workers.
So it seems that if you can do that and require it, because it is on the form, and I don't know how these people coming off the plane would have that, and that would be, I think, a real necessity as they transport to their quarantine.
But shouldn't the airlines be doing that?
We can't provide that, but right now the PPEs, we're using it for our first line employee.
But Ross, shouldn't the airlines require that? Because if you're exercising social distancing in an airplane, and I understand that there was a flight that came in, local flight, that they only had 7 open seats. So one of the passengers had emailed me and said people weren't wearing masks. So if they're sitting next to each other, they're sitting in a middle seat, and they're not wearing masks, shouldn't that be required? Is that something you can look into? Because, it defeats the purpose of social distancing.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
You had a question?
Since this was put together, do you have statistics on how much travelers that did not have residence and was being sent here by other states that was actually sent back or investigated for coming to here to be living on our beaches or in our community?
I
Basically,
have a hard time hearing what you said. I'm not sure.
he's asking how many homeless came through. How many homeless came through the airport?
Oh, at least around 9.
And how many did you not catch?
They don't know, they don't know.
Our homeless, we turned around 9 of them.
Did they turn around and go back, or what happened to them?
We sent them back on the travel program called the COVID-19 Flight Assistance Program. I heard that they kicked in 25 grand to that program, so it provides a one-way ticket.
Okay, how long do the screenings take?
Per individual,
The temperature.
The whole process?
pretty quick. I mean, like downstairs, I would say from the time they get the form to they fill it out and they get temperature checked, maybe about 5 minutes.
But my understanding was that they actually did or many of them did the form before they even got on the plane. That's what Rona had mentioned yesterday.
Well, yeah, I was talking about Clare Island. So for domestic, they fill out the form. They can fill out the egg form while they're on the plane. They can have the app, and then that is being verified once they get off the passenger loading bridge.
So what do you mean by verification? Because yesterday, DOE tax director said that they'll show the National Guard or the agent or ARF an email that they got saying that they completed the form. But who actually verifies the information on the form?
There's a screener at the gate. They compare the government ID to either the app again or the agricultural farm.
Okay, so that's for the individual, but what about where they're staying? Like, do they make sure, okay, you have a hotel reservation, 14 days? Who verifies all the information, not just who they are?
They fill out the form, and then that form, they have a reservation there, and HTA has been following up on the traveler.
But that's going to take more than 5 minutes if you're going to have to verify all the information on the form. So something's not in sync. It shouldn't be that fast.
What we do here, Senator, is we basically make sure that the information is filled out as far as government ID and the form itself, cross-checked. As far as their destination, their hotel, that is verified again by HTA. We have them checking on that, so.
Yeah, but that might
not
be
happening that 5 minute span. It happens after.
yeah, but that may be too late.
Starts.
No, the whole point is that we're not letting them leave the airport till all that information is verified. I don't understand.
I don't have an answer for that. I can get back to you on that. As far as the length of time between when the passenger off and he goes to the hotel, but they do check on the hotel.
No, there are too many gaps, Ross. There are way too many gaps. Just because someone's filling out the form, I mean, and we talked about this yesterday. Not even we don't even know if the information that they're putting on the ag form is correct. Who's verifying and at least sitting there calling? You know, they have to show the actual reservation. You're just letting them leave just because they completed the form.
Well, so far, from what I know, I spoke to HTA. They have been verifying with the form to make sure that the traveler is at that hotel.
Yeah, but they're not supposed to leave the airport till all that information is verified.
Correct.
Well, we are making sure that there is information. I know what you're trying to get at. We wanted to
Having
call
information though, Ross,
the
having
airport
information
sure
is
that-
different than having correct information. If they're just filling it out just to fill it out, how do you know it's verified?
Understand. We'll follow up on that.
They shouldn't leave the airport until it's verified.
I don't think your process has still too many gaps where people can get through without having information as to their real reservations or their point of residence or where they could be staying.
Understand.
So Ross, do you get feedback from HTA, a report daily letting you know when they called them back? How long did it take for them to verify they had a hotel? Did it take 1 day? Did it take an hour after they left the airport? Are you getting those kinds of reports back?
I don't have an actual report. I did speak with President of HTA, and they have been checking up on all passengers. It's just not the residents, but the actual travelers from the mainland, non-residents.
So they're
And
not
according to
checking on the residents.
They check up that day to make sure that they do have a reservation at the hotel. If not, they will call up the cell phone to verify where they are staying at. If it's not that, if the reservation was canceled or so forth. And if not, that is not verified, they don't answer the phone or whatnot, then we escalate that to the AG's office and then to emergency command on the neighbor islands, and for Honolulu it would be the county police.
Okay, first of all, I suggest that you should be getting a formal report every day, because we should have a record and data of this,
of the
first
tracking.
of all, and knowing whether or not HTA is in fact following up and how timely it is, because I know the ag reports, you know, they don't get to it till days later before. I'm not sure how they're doing this now. And then to exhaust our resources by having to then say, well, they're not staying at this hotel, now they got to go find out where they're at, call their cell, they don't answer, now you got to generate a form to the AG. How long will it take the AG to finally, you know, go after these people, or the police to go after? By this time, their 5-day stay, which they're supposed to be here 14, 5-day stay is done, and they're back on their way to the airport infecting people because they didn't stay quarantined for 14 days.
Understand, I'll ask HTA for a follow-up report.
Okay, but those are the kinds of things we hope that you folks will bird dog and think about as you do this, because you know, you just can't mechanically go through the motions and say, okay, they fill out the forms and that's it, and not follow up and figure out, wow, we have a gap here. We need to fill that gap.
Understand.
Thank you.
Wait, so when can you get back to us on filling the gaps and creating a new process?
Yeah, and who's gonna check up on the,
You know, because at this point in time, when you're only having, let's say, we saw today's number showed that there were 164 visitors. So if the 164 visitors have to wait at the airport for 2 hours to make sure that we verify it, then that's what it's going to have to take. I'm not sure why you're trying to expedite it so quickly, and then we're letting people through without verifying the information is correct.
Okay. Understand.
And who, you're going to put into plan that somebody will start calling the residents as well? Because HTA just, you said that they're not doing the residents, right? They're only doing hotels.
Yeah, they're not calling the residents.
Yeah, see, and that's what we were told early on, and yet, you know, Rona, you, everybody else having the idea that, yeah, they're calling when we were told by General Howard they weren't. Last week when they told us that. Yet you folks are still under the impression that they are. So the fact that you're not following up on these things is very troubling.
Okay, well, when can you get back to us on how you're going to fix your process?
Well, I need to reach out to the team here with HCA to follow up.
Okay, I mean, I don't know.
I don't want to name, I'm going to have to work this out with them and see how much effort and manpower is
But if they're not
going
going
to
to call the residents, you got to get...
No, but you only have right now you have 164 people coming through, Ross. It's not like you're talking about thousands
Right.
currently, right? So that allows you to come up, even if it's a 2-hour process, 3-hour process, if that's what it takes, then that's what it's going to take. In the meantime, we can make adjustments if and when Hawaii reopens. Then we have the time to tweak the process so that it becomes much faster.
How many people, non-essential
I
categories?
think you had said before that that's not your kuleana, but I think we're looking at the airports that it is, because you're stopping people from coming into the state if they aren't, if they are positive or if they're not following the requirements of having a place to stay. So we're looking to you to set up that system of all people coming through into
Where's
the
that list
state
yesterday?
and how they can
The six from the 6th.
ensure that they have a place to stay that's verified and they can quarantine and have masks when they leave. So if you can have a process that adds all of those things into your process.
Well, the other thing, Ross, is you're going to have to look at redeploying people internally from within airports. Because you don't have the kind of numbers that you normally would have, I'm sure that you have some employees that can be redeployed to help with this process. So if you have everybody working as though we have the same amount of passengers coming in, or how have you reassigned work at the airport?
Yeah, we can staff some of their staff to help out with that. It's not a problem. But again, I find out the process. I need to work with HPA and the rest of the team on following up. I know that trips are diminished to the 200
Ross, you don't have no. This is on your property, so it becomes your responsibility. You cannot let them leave the airports until all this information is verified.
Okay.
Ross, how many non-essential workers do you have that are working from home?
I think the count was at 73.
73 non-essential workers working at home. How many of that cannot do any duties at home or are doing less than a full day's work at home?
We reported 0 non-essential. Everybody is there, they're essential.
So every single person is essential?
Yes.
People that work on the tarmac, stuff like that?
We had a lot of work around the airport that we're doing because of the fact that it's closed now. So we're getting a lot of the deep cleaning. We're getting into a lot of maintenance of the airport facilities that we couldn't do when the passenger counts are at the 30,000 level.
But don't you have clerical, don't you have others that might not be doing a full day work that can be deployed?
We'll look into that.
Okay, well, you just mentioned that you could actually reassign people, so you must have some people that currently...
Be careful. Yeah, we got unions to deal with too, so I gotta take a look at that.
What was that?
He said he has union. No, Ross, that issue's been dealt with already. The unions have already sent out a press release saying they're okay with the redeployment plan that Riker gave them.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to take that much manpower to go after 150 to 250 passengers.
Yeah, especially if HTA is calling half of them. So this is the kind of stuff, leadership, we're hoping that you're going to be giving us, Ross.
So what about, how many of the passengers actually, are you tracking how many passengers rent rental cars?
I haven't tracked that.
I mean, because I would think,
Shut down the rental cars.
I would think that would be,
No.
That's what the Kauai.
go ahead, Russ.
That's what Kauai asked.
But I would have to segregate that between actual passengers, domestic passengers versus inter-island.
But even-
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because if you're not, if as long as you're not a medical or you're on the essential list, you shouldn't be driving around
And you gotta be quarantined anyway, right?
inter-island or from any domestic or international flight.
I'll go get that figure for you. I'll try and reach out to the consortium.
Well, that because that's another way you can track if the visitors are driving around.
Yeah, by the mileage.
I mean, I'm not sure if there's an identification on the car that says with a specific date of when they landed.
Yeah, but shouldn't the rental cars, knowing that quarantine is there and they have a mainland driver's license, they should be refused and get the bus, take them straight to their hotel?
Okay, so you don't have any employees currently working at home, but they can't do any work, so they're just at home. You have everyone.
No. The question was how many was essential. All airport employees are considered essential. We have 73 that are teleworking.
Okay, so all your employees are either coming to work or except 73 are teleworking.
That's correct.
How many total employees?
And how many total airport employees?
Hold on. Right now we got about 1,100
Oh, this is statewide.
and 1,190.
Okay, and that's all statewide or just Honolulu?
That's for statewide.
And all are reporting to work except for 73 people who are teleworking.
70 are working.
73 is working.
Wait.
Telework.
Okay,
Even the neighbor islands, because isn't the number of planes being diminished? I mean, it's decreasing.
27.
They're all still at work.
I couldn't hear what you said. Something about they're all still at work.
No,
Everybody
neighbor islands.
who works there
Neighbor islands as well, because aren't you decreasing the number of flights coming in
It's
or
totally
airlines coming in?
decreased.
So are they all at work at the neighbor
Yes.
islands?
What are they doing?
It's come to work. We're having them do other duties around the airport, such as doing a food sanitization and deep cleaning of the restrooms for the custodians. And we got other
How do you get past
the other maintenance workers doing other types of maintenance work at our airports as well. Because of the fact that hold rooms have been, not hold rooms, the
this
gates
is
have
where
been
they
closed as well as the hold rooms.
verify the essential,
What about
non-essential.
other than custodial staff, like clerical, professional, what are they doing?
For example, take our accounting section. They continue to get information and they continue to work on staff.
Essential worker,
As far as concessions, airlines are concerned. And right now they're going through a change in our accounting system because of the fact that we need to adapt to our program that was launched for the relief program, financial relief program. So there's a lot of work here at the airport, not because of the fact that we have less planes in Hawaii. The work still continues.
Okay, well, it doesn't seem to add up.
Sir, I want to share with you guys, there was you folks know about the $133 million that the airport system is going to receive for Hawaii. And that grant requires 90% of the workforce to be maintained.
No, we're not arguing that. We're just making sure that the workforce.
So we're finding work for them to do other than what normally did under normal work duties.
Okay, because we're talking. Okay.
Can I just say, I understand custodial work, I understand you gotta sanitize, but you're talking about a total number of, 200 passengers coming in a day? 400 passengers coming in a day, so you're not having every single bathroom open, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so your amount of work has decreased substantially because the number of facilities being utilized have decreased substantially. So common sense would tell us that you're not going to have that much work to do so that you have these individuals that can be redeployed. And I'm not sure that they are all essential under this emergency.
Right, so for example, we leave that to our managers at each airport. But for example, here, we do a lot of pressure washing right in front of the terminals itself. You know, all day long, there's walking back and forth in front of the terminal. So we're doing a full pressure washing of a lot of areas within the airport.
Yes, I understand, but you can pressure wash. You don't pressure wash every single day. Anyway, I'm sure, I just hope that you folks are really looking at this seriously, because there are a lot of people that are out of work right now. There's a lot of resources that we can utilize to make sure that we keep our state safe. And one of them is calling and following up on these travelers. If you're going to let them leave the airport, then we're hoping that you have these workers following up and doing that.
Like I said earlier, we will follow up for you. We'll get you a report.
Okay, can you explain why was the base yard staff sent home for unpaid leave previously?
Yeah, during that period of time, there was a lot of passenger count. The passenger count was still high. So what we decided at that time was to separate the stagger the work shifts.
Okay, so they were paid full time, but you sent them home with unpaid leave then.
Right, but once the passenger level came down to 500, 500, somewhere around there, we ordered them back.
Wow, it was more work.
Okay, so
also try to consult so that one crew doesn't get infected.
Okay, and then what do you have them doing now then?
Like I said earlier, we have them doing various types of maintenance work throughout the airport system.
So how long were they on paid leave?
I think it was probably 2 weeks. Not paid leave, they were coming into work every other day. We're splitting the shifts.
So they were 50% on paid leave then?
That's what they were doing.
Approximately, yeah.
That's what they were doing.
I think, I don't know.
So Ross, the urgency is to protect ourselves from.
What you do, right? I think is an unprecedented crisis. I mean, it's not something that happens all the time, and try to adjust accordingly.
No, I don't think anybody's arguing that. That same argument that you're making that this is a crisis that is the very reason why we want people to be calling and verifying information. The same reason why you're saying you have to go do all these things if you feel warranted or not, but yet we don't have the people doing the tracking.
They're power washing and they're not keeping the people safe.
Yeah, so you have 1,190 people, and I don't know all of them are power washing. So, if you can get the ones that can. Yeah. So what we're looking at is how do you protect us from these people coming in without having verified places to stay to quarantine for 14 days. So somebody needs to call. So I think what we would like is a protocol. So you have ID verification, self-quarantine information, temperature test, and then this other verify residence. If you can tell us how many people are doing that so that we can see that either you or HTA is calling and know that these people are there for 14 days. And you do a protocol for us of what that would look like in your staffing of that.
Okay, you know what? Tomorrow we're going to be in because we have a briefing in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. So if you can be available either right before that or after that, and you can give us an update on the plan. So that gives you at least 24 hours to go and talk to your people.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's someone,
Any other questions?
the question is that on our neighbor islands where the airports are real small, yeah, and I'm hearing that most of the airports on the neighbor islands are closed. So that's the question that we're just asking, because if that's the case, a bunch of custodians and cleaning and sanitizing can be done within a day on an 8-hour shift. I mean, we just wanted to know where the 1,100 guys are working, because if 1,100 guys are working, there's more guys than the passengers that we have at the airport. Right?
Do you know what specific airports you are?
No, the tracking should be happening at, and verification should be happening at every airport.
So we lost them.
Yeah.
Place where you have passengers.
Anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so thank you, Ross. So we'll,
Okay, so you basically, what you want is you want to follow up on better follow up on the passengers that come through before they leave the airport and they go to a hotel.
yeah, all the information has to be verified, because if it's not,
They don't go home. They don't go in.
we can't let them leave the airport.
Yeah, and we want you to be more diligent with HTA, know what they're doing, exactly what they're doing, getting reports from them, and then also the review of your employees and as to your essential workers, non-essential workers, and so forth.
So we do get the report from HTA on passenger arrivals. What we don't get is any information on tracking, how many calls were made, on how many visitors, what the outcome has been. We don't get any of that kind of information.
Got it. Thank you, Dan.
The rental cars.
And if you can follow up on the rental car component too, please.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay, so our briefing tomorrow is what?
All this better. All of this together, better process. Policy as they go along.
Okay, so tomorrow, we'll try to call you and let you know what time tomorrow.
Yeah, have Dean send me an invite or whatnot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so tomorrow's meeting is going to be at 3 o'clock and we'll have a briefing from Haima.
Okay.
So thank you members.
Senator.
Thank you.